A man is walking down the stairs, heading toward the inner part of the temple, and he soon comes face to face with a massive creature, with large horns protruding from its head. The beast starts roaring furiously, as if ready to attack the intruder. From a distance, large magical circles can be seen, seemingly emerging from where they were standing. The young man appears deeply pensive, as if mourning something that had happened in his life. He kneels down to touch the ground with his hands and use his power. A cold blue energy begins to circulate around his body. That chill was enough to freeze the entire earth, wrapping it up effortlessly, as if lulling it to sleep. Once his power fully manifests, a massive female figure appears behind him. Gradually, that place begins to be covered in ice, and the creature that was once aggressive now seems very uneasy with the change in temperature. That woman gently blows toward it, and the creature is frozen in a large block of ice. Just as the conflict began, it was brought to an end. The young man looks at the bright sky, while the icy energy he summons slowly fades away. His gaze is full of determination because his task is not yet over. The Shin family is among the most powerful in Korea when it comes to magic, and even among them, the protagonist is exceptionally gifted, at least until the day of the accident. Hale's father asks if he understood everything he heard. The young man confirms that he did, stating he is the third son of this prestigious family, saying he will bring results worthy of his family's reputation as he plans to graduate at the top of his class and become the greatest mage in the world. The patriarch acknowledges that the boy possesses a potential unmatched by anyone else. He's far superior to his own brothers, and he's looking forward to seeing the results, hoping his son will become the pinnacle of magic itself. That's exactly what the boy intends to do. Determined to prove to his father that he won't fail under any circumstance, the patriarch of the family is currently the most powerful mage in the nation. Since that conversation 2 years ago, time has passed and he is now attending the Obelisk Academy. A professor asks the sophomores to gather with the others, because today there will be a practical exam. He tells Sekiuk to get ready since he'll be going first, and says there's no need to be nervous, but the boy arrogantly replies that he has no reason to feel that way, since the lower half of the class had already been decided. Among them is the protagonist, a loser who can't even use basic magic, and the arrogant student doesn't know how he even made it to the second year, claiming he's a useless piece of trash who can't do the simplest things. In today's world, mages are not only rare but also incredibly valuable. The practical exam begins and digital beasts automatically materialize in front of the arrogant student. He attacks them using fire magic, proving extremely effective. Since he completed the exam within the time limit, he passes, but still takes the opportunity to say it was easier than expected. With artificial intelligence, magic has become easier. Every mage has chips implanted in their bodies that assist with casting, but our protagonist isn't compatible with this. It's now his turn to be examined. The beasts have already materialized, and the boy begins to gather mana in his hands. This is the fundamental source of magic. It must be channeled through the heart and then processed through the 8 steps of the magical formula. But as it takes time to complete this lengthy process, the creatures begin to attack. Watching the test are his classmates, including the arrogant student, who is relishing the moment of failure. Hale is worried about the exam, but also irritated by the comments as he is a mage considered obsolete in modern times. Unfortunately, he doesn't complete the exam within the required time and fails to earn a passing grade. With no shame at all, his classmates begin laughing at his failure, while the boy deeply laments being unable to succeed. But not everything is bad. Compared to his previous performance, he managed to increase his invocation speed. As soon as they learned he couldn't use artificial intelligence, his father gave up all expectations, even giving him medicine to destroy his mana circle. But the boy refuses to give up on his dreams. Being outdated, he can only learn through ancient books. Given the massive amount of material he owns, he really wishes he could read it all on a screen, since he no longer has space to store everything. While lost in thought, he comes across a peculiar book, one he has no memory of ever purchasing. He decided to pick it up with his hands to examine its contents. The book is quite old, but it's strangely well adorned. In fact, it looks like something very expensive. Trying to understand its words, he has no idea what it could be, because the handwriting is terrible, until he comes across a very well-known name, Baetnyo. This person was the first great mage of humanity and the first emperor of his kingdom. He is considered the creator of all magic. When our protagonist was just a child, he used to read many books that told pieces of this man's biography. While immersed in his memories, the book began to glow subtly, still in his hands, until the glowing energy grew so strong he had to squint his eyes. Dropping the book to the floor, he started wondering what that was, and to his surprise, the book didn't even fall. The light kept getting stronger, making the boy even more intrigued. A voice began to emerge from those pages, speaking to the one who shares the same constitution and is able to hear it. Baetnyo himself was leaving this book for him. Realizing what was happening, the boy began to wonder about the identity of that voice. Once again, he is taken by his memories. Back then, he still didn't know that for being a displaced one, he would receive the greatest of gifts. The teacher said that the students who failed the test that day would need extra classes. Some began to wonder if anyone had actually failed, until they pointed at our protagonist. He was unable to use Ai. He endured all that without any power, never imagining he could one day be revived. After that experience, a new day dawned and the students were at the cafeteria having breakfast. Sitting at one of the tables is our protagonist and no one is with him, until a boy approached him, asking if he was going to eat alone again. Accepting the presence of this other person, he was surprised that he came too. The boy with tied-up hair said the protagonist's food looked really good. His name is Ji Sunchin, and the first impression he gives might be of someone a little stupid. But he's one of the top 10 talents of that academy and became a third circle mage at the age of 18. In truth, he's very skilled. Now the two of them are at the same table having a meal, and the goofy boy is taking what the protagonist didn't eat onto his own plate. Within that academy, he's the only one the protagonist can call a friend. Sunchin told his friend that if he was having any problems, he just needed to say the word and it would be solved immediately. He said everything was fine, there was no need for that kind of thing, but he mentioned finding a really strange book the day before. A very strange book, and everything past page 3 was completely blank. The book said something about Beitinio, but since there was nothing written beyond that, he thought maybe one of the other students had done something to it. Yet he heard a voice coming from its pages. The words said Beitinio was leaving his magic to the one who would succeed him or something like that, and that anyone without the same constitution wouldn't even be able to open it. Sunchin found that very curious and asked if he could try opening it too. But the protagonist hadn't finished sharing his information. There was something written on the last page. It said one had to die first, and after that morbid news, his friend grew concerned. The words continued. It wasn't about the heart, but rather, it was necessary to create a mana circle in one's own brain. Sunchin immediately realized this could be fatal, and suggested they inspect the book before doing anything else. Night fell over the academy, and now the two were inside the protagonist's dorm. His friend would try to open the book. With it in his hands, he tried to force the pages open with all his strength. After giving up, he realized it wouldn't be possible to open it. There was likely some kind of magic preventing it. Since he was no longer interested in that, he said goodbye to the protagonist, wishing him a good night. The door quickly closed and the boy was completely alone. The book was already open in his hands and he was contemplating some of its notes. After witnessing his friend's effort, he became even more intrigued that he could open the book so easily. Some symbols began to appear before his eyes. He noticed those pages had been blank. Once again, the voice returned, speaking directly to his successor. If the hypothesis was correct, it said he was very likely using a mana circle in the heart to invoke magic. For normal people, that must be the way, but for people like them, that wasn't the right method. As soon as he finished absorbing the information, the book glowed and levitated once more. If he were willing to accept its will and ready to become a disciple, he needed to destroy the mana circle in his heart and recreate a mana circle inside his brain. After doing that, he would have to open the book again to receive more instructions. Our protagonist started thinking this was a cruel joke as he was being led to perform an act of madness. The source of all magic is extremely toxic to the brain, since mana can cause the mind to collapse, possibly resulting in brain death. In other words, if he tried to do that, he would almost certainly suffer an agonizing death. Turning his back on the scriptures, he said no one would be insane enough to go through with it, leaving the book abandoned and lying on the floor of his room. At dawn the next day, a professor asked the protagonist what was going on with him. The young man had brought that mysterious book to the professor so it could be examined. Inspecting the cover, he noticed it was written in an ancient language. At first glance, it appeared to be quite old. Wanting to know what exactly he should examine, the boy asked the professor to try opening it, and to confirm whether it was being magically sealed, noting that there had been a strange atmosphere among the students lately. The professor advised him to pay more attention to his studies rather than rumors, but for now, he needed to concentrate. He was carefully examining the book, looking for any signs of magic. Returning the book, he said there was no magic present at all, and once again urged the boy to focus more on his studies. Our protagonist became even more thoughtful. His friend couldn't open the book, and after being examined by a professor, nothing was found. But that didn't frighten him. In fact, it made him consider the possibility that the book might actually be real. Once again in his room, he is examining that mysterious book. In one of his hands are the pills given to him by his father, capable of destroying his mana circle. The advice he received from the patriarch was to forget about magic and focus on theory. But this leap of faith he's about to take isn't to give up, it's to go even further. Even so, swallowing those pills is terrifying as he doesn't know if the book is telling the truth. Since he has few options to reach his dreams, he decides to take the pills anyway, because that day, he was going to die. After swallowing the pills, he begins to feel pain all over his body, and he can feel the mana circle in his heart being completely destroyed. That pain signifies the death of a mage. From this point forward, what he's about to do is completely forbidden, attempting to establish a mana circle inside his brain. Now he was living again as a mage. As the magic starts to circulate through his head, the pain begins to fade. It was so intense that the boy thought he was going to die. And for a moment, he truly believed he would die, until he heard a whisper from someone else. It felt like hands were reaching toward his ears. The voice asked if future generations could hear it, and our protagonist realized it was the same voice from the book. He could feel the change happening in his body, as if the spirits responsible for mana were dancing and coexisting. He could sense everything those voices were doing. They were smiling and singing, as if he were being blessed. Only then did he open his eyes, realizing he had fallen to the ground. Immediately, the boy stood up in shock, trying to understand if he was truly alive, until he looked at the book beside him, which had decided to open by itself. Examining its contents, he noticed once again that some of the pages that had been blank were now filled with writing, and the voice coming from it was getting clearer and clearer. It congratulated the boy for taking his first steps. Only then did the voice reveal the name of the book. It was called Idrid. From this point forward, the legend of our protagonist would begin through that book. The mysterious voice said it would leave all of its magic to our protagonist, for those who came seeking its knowledge. From now on, the boy would be its disciple. Those words filled the protagonist with joy. Since that mysterious event, a few days had passed. Classes proceeded normally within the academy, but the boy was completely immersed in that mysterious book as new notes continued to appear. He never imagined that learning magic could be so fun. Idrid is filled with diverse knowledge. There he learned that mana has its own ill will, and for most people, when it comes into contact with the brain, that will clashes with their own, leading to madness. But the boy is different. His willpower is strong enough to suppress the will of mana, preventing his mind from collapsing. Now he understands why he can't work with AI, as his brain blocks the chip's interference. While he was deeply absorbed in his reading, the teacher called everyone's attention. Soon there would be an exam for the second-year students, but this time a new rule would be introduced. Faced with this news, everyone began to listen very carefully. It was about the students who are not able to meet the minimum standard. They will be expelled from the academy. This was personally proposed by the head of the Shin family. Upon hearing that, our protagonist grew more serious, and the class jerk felt relieved. It was about time they got rid of the useless ones. The teacher didn't even bother hiding the fact that he was also pleased with it. Meanwhile, the protagonist grew more and more pensive, thinking about his father's intentions. Outside, under the twilight glow, the students were heading back home. The boy knew that renting simulation stations for training was very expensive. That place he had visited cost 200,000 per hour, and in his current situation, that was too much. Even so, he decided to go in, being greeted by the receptionist. The boy said he would hire 1 hour, and the receptionist asked if he was going in alone. After confirming that, the receptionist gave him a card and asked the boy to go to room 14. He would receive all the instructions there. But the boy was already familiar with it and knew how to use the system. The receptionist knew he was from the Shin family, but could only feel sorry for him, knowing the boy was incompatible with AI. Inside the training room, the simulation would begin, and the wolf challenge was about to start. Several creatures materialized around our protagonist. Even though none of them were real, their fury was highly convincing. They were low-tier monsters, and dealing with 10 of them at once wouldn't be easy. The Academy's average time for this was 12 minutes and 33 seconds. But ever since he changed his mana circle, the boy had been training daily according to the instructions in that book. There was no better way to test his progress and what his new mana circle was capable of. Wasting no time, he summoned an infinite circle that surrounded his body. The digitalized creatures, which from now on will be called Digimons, began to attack. But the boy managed to summon a water barrier to protect himself. Observing his speed and power, he realized that it was truly incredible, almost unbelievable. Ordinary mages use a mana circle in their hearts to be compatible with AI. But now the protagonist could use his whole body for that function, channeling through his brain, and his dormant magical potential had finally been released. He could cast magical circles at incredible speed. Then the voice told him not to be impressed by such small things. He still had a long road of training ahead. The infinite circle was just the foundation of Bait Neo's magic style. He must control the magic through the images formed in his mind. These were the instructions from the first book of Bait Neo's magic style, The Intention of the Heart. It didn't take long for the reserved hour to end. As he left the facility, the receptionist thanked him and asked him to visit again. Heading to room 14 to clean it, the staff member just wanted to go home. But he was curious to know how that renegade genius trained, until he stumbled upon some very intriguing information. He had defeated the Digimons in under 7 minutes, a time that matches world-class competition levels. He thought it could only be a fraud. Maybe a device was broken, and that's why he felt that kick was deserved. Heading toward his dorm, our protagonist was growing more and more confident. This was the beginning of his own legend. To form his first circle, the process was very demanding. The notes in the book were completely different from everything he had learned so far. It said that mana is your arms and legs, your heart and mind, and should move as you will it. But it was hard to find any clarity in such vague words. It felt like trying to grasp something that doesn't exist. Mages call this the barrier of enlightenment, when they encounter the limits of their own magic, something common in all eras. Because of this, he decided to focus on mana circulation throughout his body, just as written in the book. While dedicating himself fervently, he also wondered if this would be enough. He had already been doing this exercise for 10 hours. Normally, he would have lost consciousness by now due to exhaustion, but that still hadn't happened. The next day, he headed to the academy as usual, and on the way, he ran into his friend who greeted him. Seeing the exhausted expression on the protagonist's face, he asked if everything was alright with him. For the boy, focusing on mana circulation is no easy task. He needs to quickly get used to this new mana circle. At the age of 12, he reached the second circle and was immediately recognized as a prodigy. And now, all he can manage is a single circle in his head, and he's thinking of ways to progress. Breaking through the barrier of enlightenment is essential for that, At least that's what he used to hear from his father back when he still had expectations for him. Perfection is nothing more than a shackle, a lie born for human arrogance. But now those words hold an entirely different meaning for him. Meditating once again, he was able to feel things differently. His focus was entirely directed inward, on his body. Then he began to feel the energy flowing through his hands and feet, while thinking that his heart and mind should move as he wills. A free imagination is fundamental for casting spells without a chant. This is how the chip makes life easier for mages. It's a very solid technique. The boy now tries to use his thoughts freely, able to create objects that can freely change shape, ignoring the structure of traditional forms. In this way, he was able to conjure several firebirds flying around him. Since he only has one circle form, that experience is extremely draining, but the result is impressive. He is already breaking through the enlightenment barrier, reaching even greater heights. One of the professors came to the room where the protagonist was, informing him that Hale had visitors. He found it strange that someone had come all the way there to visit him. With both of them walking down the corridor toward the meeting room, the professor said it was the boy's father. He was already waiting for his son in the visitor's room and asked him to come in. The professor informed him that he had brought the boy. Then the patriarch turned around to examine him. It had been some time since they had last seen each other. Knowing that this was a private conversation, the professor said he would excuse himself, leaving the two alone. Once seated, the patriarch began to talk about his son's attendance at school. It seemed he hadn't taken the medicine he had been given, and only then did the boy say that some things had happened. He had now made significant progress in his magical abilities. That left the patriarch disheartened, realizing that his son was still chasing a hopeless dream. And the protagonist said he was determined to become the greatest mage of the current era. Those words sounded far too arrogant to the patriarch, who looked at his son firmly. But there wasn't the slightest hesitation in the boy. With a deep sigh, he said his son had already wasted an entire year, and it's time for him to face reality. No matter how hard he works or even what he may achieve in the future, if he's not compatible with AI, there's no way he'll become a decent mage. Still, he does have a unique talent. He could dedicate himself to theory, and even someone as out of place as him could make use of that talent. The boy ignored everything he had just heard and said once again that he would not give up on magic, because he doesn't want to live an ordinary life like everyone else. And he doesn't want to rely on his family's name or his father's influence either. His goals are even greater. He wants to become the next head of the Madosian family. That only made the patriarch even more silent, until he said that becoming a great mage or the head of a family is not something achieved through ambition alone. And with a confident smile on his face, the boy said he would prove his point. This only made his father more skeptical, as he knew his son was on the verge of being expelled from the academy. But the boy declared that he would place among the top 10 students in the next exam, and if he failed, he would leave the academy to become a theoretical mage as his father advised. However, if he succeeded, his father would have to recognize him and promise to give him all the necessary support in the future. That only made the old man more worried, thinking that his son's latest achievement had been developing an unjustified sense of confidence. There was nothing left to be said, and he began to walk out of the room, telling his son that he hopes this won't be an accomplishment without meaning, leaving the boy deep in thought, even though he was more confident than ever. A few more days had passed and classes continued as usual. The professor was about to announce what type of evaluation the students would face. Some students start chatting. Apparently, it's going to be a duel between classmates. The test will be a single elimination tournament among the students. It will begin in 3 days. And as expected in any story where the protagonist has sudden development, there will be an audience during this test, which made the jerk very happy, since he still doesn't know he's just a side character. The teacher wished the students would do their best, and our protagonist knows that his time to shine has arrived. The news quickly spreads among the students as even members of the Magic Tower are coming to witness the duels. Our protagonist knows this will generate a huge impact. The presence of the Magic Tower also draws the media. It's an organization formed by the 12 greatest mages in the world, wielding the power of a nation. The dream of every young mage is to join it someday. That's when the jerk character approached him. He seemed curious about the protagonist's condition and asked how he'd been doing. The boy said nothing, merely hiding his frustration. The jerk's name is Seyuk, a very wealthy and also very talented student. And by the magical powers of plot force, the protagonist and the jerk will face off during the exam. Trying to intimidate our protagonist, the jerk said he was totally screwed, and that he would finally get his revenge for what happened 5 years ago. A flashback takes us to that moment. It was the final tournament in the junior category. That jerk had lost miserably to our protagonist. When he found out the protagonist was a displaced one, he started taking advantage of that, saying he would soon be expelled. Now the jerk was thrilled because he would have the chance to beat the protagonist up right before his expulsion. He'd make sure to hit him so hard he'd go home crying. But the protagonist was confident. With the smile of someone who's armed with a Glock, he said he wouldn't be the one going home in tears. Even if he acts like a jerk, the guy has zero resistance to provocation. It didn't take long for their argument to draw the attention of other students. The jerk said the protagonist must be completely insane, probably suffering from some kind of insurmountable mental challenge. He claimed he didn't understand the situation and would get beaten so badly he'd have to crap upside down. but the protagonist wasn't affected by any of those words. Then he remembered, 5 years ago, the jerk was acting the same way, and in the end, lost miserably. Apparently, time had passed for both of them, but the jerk hadn't improved his skills at all. Since his tolerance for insults is non-existent, the jerk started getting really pissed, wanting to hit his rival right then and there. Even more sly, the protagonist apologized for making him feel bad, while calling him a coward. This pushed the jerk to the brink of sanity. He then grabbed our protagonist by the collar, calling him a big dummy and saying he was ugly. But our protagonist was even sharper. He said that in order to fall, you have to climb something first, something the jerk had never done in his life. Besides, once a genius, always a genius. That's the truth that separates them, and he would make sure to teach that lesson well during their duel. Finishing his words, the protagonist walked away as if nothing had happened. But the jerk was losing control, biting his nails non-stop from having his ego shattered. Now he wants to incinerate the boy down to the bone. News about Hale began to spread. The return of the genius, the fallen prodigy, the dark horse. That's what they were calling him. Reading the news, the boy also noticed that they were talking about his rival, since he too came from a wealthy family. Knowing the jerk's personality, it was expected that he would do something about it. Many people are eagerly awaiting the prodigy's return during that exam. But for him, that's not a bad thing. He truly wants to be noticed by his peers. While lost in his daydreams of victory, his phone started ringing. Answering, he began talking to his father and said he had read the news of the day. He told the old man not to worry about anything. There was a new lion on that mountain now. But his father already knew the son he had. He asked if it was him who had caused all that mess. The boy confirmed he provoked the jerk just to gain more attention in the media. That made the patriarch regret what they had discussed. They didn't go forward with that challenge because they trusted their son, but because they believed there would be no defeat tied to the family name. Even with the boy's determination, the father doesn't believe his son will win, and now the family's reputation might be stained. The boy said that the public already believes he was disowned, so the damage to the family's name would be minimized. But that's not enough for his father, who remains disappointed. Because wherever his son goes, the family name will follow, and the boy is well aware of that. But thinking about potential gains, he believes the risk is worth it. Hearing this, the old man started wondering if his son was smoking crack, because he has no idea what benefits they would gain if his son actually won, and the boy said that he himself is the benefit. Since he's going to become a more powerful mage, one of the strongest in history, the old man thinks these are just youthful delusions, as if his son is already stronger than the Tower Mages. With no hope of bringing reason to the boy's head, he said he would leave him be. With one condition: if he brought disgrace to the family, he should be prepared for the consequences. And that's how their cold interaction came to an end. But the protagonist is more confident than ever, because the stage for his performance had been set. Finally, the day of the evaluation had arrived. Many people are present in the audience, including journalists and photographers. Our protagonist is one of the more well-known participants due to his family name. The jerk asked him if he liked the article, since the prodigy has always been popular, and he can't wait to expose him in front of everyone because there won't be time for him to cast any spell. Smiling casually, the protagonist said he wouldn't be the one losing that duel, and he's very grateful that the jerk unknowingly helped execute his plan. Even after being provoked by the jerk, he said he doesn't care one bit since the guy is just a nobody, and warned that he'd end the fight quickly. That filled the jerk with rage. He figured his opponent had completely lost his mind, until the protagonist raised a single finger, saying he would win the match with a first circle spell. The Obelisk Academy arena is packed. Everyone heard the promise made by the prodigy. In front of all those people, the jerk could only do one thing: get extremely pissed off. He can't stand being disrespected by trash like that. Little does he know, he'll be spending a lot on therapy very soon. That would be the first duel, and the referee gave the signal for them to begin. In front of all those eyes, our slightly narcissistic protagonist was eager to start shining. The first move came from his opponent. It didn't take long for his eyes to grasp what was happening. The fireball that had been conjured didn't even hit the protagonist. His desire to crush the protagonist is so intense that the chip implanted in his neck was overheating. Clearly not Intel. Must be Ryzen. This time, he was going to use a third circle spell, Explosion, something our protagonist had been eagerly waiting for. The catastrophic effect of the spell spreads throughout the arena. Inside the cloud of dust, no one knows what happened. The jerk started bragging, convinced that the outcome was inevitable. But his smug monologue was immediately cut short. The victory hadn't come. Before him stood his opponent with intact clothes and no injuries on his body. Fueled by rage, he tried to use an even more powerful spell to win, sending several fireballs toward our protagonist. Completely unfazed, he began to gather a bit of water in the palm of his hand, creating a barrier that protected him from the fire attack. Even seeing all of this, the little jerk couldn't accept that his attacks were ineffective. Moreover, all of them had been blocked with great ease by his opponent. Someone mysterious was observing all of this, coming to the conclusion that it was indeed quite strange. Because that young man was casting first circle spells without any kind of incantation. His secretary asked why he had rearranged his schedule just to witness a student duel. She asked if he knew anything about Hale's magic, and the man replied no. All he knew was what he had read in the newspaper about the return of a prodigy. He came purely out of curiosity. But his secretary refused to believe in such a coincidence. If word got out that the head of the Blue Magic Tower, an 8th Circle Mage, had come just to watch this duel, it would cause a huge uproar. Trying to excuse himself to his secretary, Kim said he was well aware of that. That's why he was in the room reserved for important people. As he watched the match, another person entered the room. Kim greeted him politely, though he hadn't expected that person to be here too. Inside the arena, our protagonist appears to be quite calm. The same cannot be said for the Jerk, whose most powerful magic was blocked by a first circle technique. He tries to replay the image in his mind to understand what just happened. His opponent's casting speed is abnormally high. Knowing exactly what he must be thinking, the protagonist asks if the Jerk was feeling curious. But the boy, clearly upset and with a wounded ego, told him to shut up, telling him to just die after the next attack. Completely oblivious to the reality playing out before his eyes, the Jerk used the same attack again. A massive explosion occurred upon impact. Using the same approach and doing the same thing, he hoped to achieve a different result, only to be brutally struck by reality seeing that his opponent remained standing. But the protagonist's patience was also wearing thin. Now it was his turn to take the offensive. He forced the Jerk to dodge a wind spear that nearly grazed his head. That was concerning. The strike came so close the Jerk almost lost his hair. And not only had he failed to do any damage, he hadn't even noticed his opponent had switched elements, so he went back to stroking his own ego, saying he wouldn't lose to first circle spells. But our protagonist disagreed. He would lose and it would be humiliating. He hurled another wind spear at him, but this time the boy had to summon a magical shield. Noticing his defense had worked, a flash of hope lit up in his eyes, and he started mocking our protagonist, saying he shouldn't feel so confident just because he increased his casting speed. Unfortunately, his speech wasn't finished. Wind spears were already flying through the air. This time, the Jerk was struck in the arm, and he had no idea how the protagonist managed to cast his spears that quickly. Now he wanted to know what mysterious technique his opponent was using. The others watching the battle also wanted that answer. Creating a small sphere of wind in one hand, our protagonist said the Jerk must be immune to knowledge, because his stupidity was genuinely terrifying. So he showed him how it's done. The wind sphere transformed into a small bird, which rushed swiftly toward the Jerk. He couldn't tell what kind of thing that was, and if it was a wind spear, it shouldn't have a double hit ability. But our protagonist confirmed that's exactly what it had. Because he was capable of shaping things that way, it was up to the Jerk to defend himself, as now there were 4 of them. And the birds soared cheerfully toward their target. The poor Jerk thought summoning a shield would be enough, only to be shocked by the force with which he was being hit. He believed that if he could just block those attacks, he might still come out victorious, only to feel a sharp sting right in his back. One of those spears had taken a different path, bypassing the shield. Our protagonist didn't stop mocking him, saying the Jerk looked like a drug addict in withdrawal, and that his beating session had only just begun. More wind birds were summoned, and the Jerk had to move to dodge them. Keeping his distance was his only option. Magical power is limited to a certain range. If he stayed far enough away, he figured he wouldn't be hit by any of those attacks. Our protagonist said the decision he had made was actually quite good, and because of that, it was time to change tactics, so he brought his hands together. Strong winds began forming inside the arena, frightening the Jerk. Soon everyone would smell what was coming from his underwear, the first item to be obliterated in this fight. An even bigger wind bird had been formed, something much more powerful. The leader of the Blue Tower was impressed. The prodigy wasn't just casting quickly. He was also altering the trajectory of the spells mid-air, something truly exceptional. Only then was the identity of the mysterious figure in the room revealed. It was our protagonist's father, and the current head of the Mage family, an 8th Circle Mage. The secretary confirmed that the prodigy's magic wasn't obeying the rules they were subject to, the open code system. Open code magic follows certain criteria. The reverse slash, for instance, has a maximum range of 38 meters, and its trajectory can only be altered once. In other words, open code magic only works according to preset parameters. Nowadays, mage duels resemble a mental game where each side tries to predict the opponent's moves. But our protagonist is on another level. He ignores all the limitations of modernity, and his great wind spear struck a target in a devastating manner. The impact had shattered the arena floor, and the Jerk couldn't believe how much trouble he was having. The protagonist and his opponent was underestimating the capabilities of single circle spells. If he ends up exhausted from using his most powerful spells, then even a pen is enough to take someone's life. But he didn't expect a lecture in the middle of the fight, and the Jerk was completely confused. Materializing a bit of water in his hands, the protagonist demonstrated a single circle spell. He said the principle of the pen also applies to magic. Something complex isn't required to end a life. With that, the Jerk's head was engulfed by a ball of water, cutting off his ability to breathe. Students' bodies are protected by their uniforms, which generate a magical barrier around them. Unfortunately, it seems that material wasn't enough to prevent the Jerk's suffering. He was already collapsed on the ground in total despair, unable to breathe. Faced with imminent victory, the entire arena fell silent. There was nothing more our protagonist needed to do to secure his win. Looking at the match referee, he said the outcome was already very clear. Asking if he should continue his attacks, the referee declared the fight over, announcing to everyone who the winner was Shin Hail. The poor jerk had to be carried out as he didn't even have the strength to walk. Our protagonist walked out calmly, knowing he had achieved his goals. Looking at his hand, he realized it had been a long time since he felt fizz, the thrill of winning a competition, which is incredibly satisfying. Now he had become the mage he once was. The head of the Blue Tower was walking through the corridors, thinking about what he had just witnessed. That really was the return of a great prodigy. With intrigued eyes, he found the event very interesting, and now he wants to learn more about that young boy. The protagonist's best friend immediately ran to him, having heard that his friend had won the match. He was eager to know what kind of training he had done. He was extremely impressed with the movement of the wind spears and how they combined together. Only then did the protagonist ask if his friend wanted to know the details, and he cheerfully replied yes. Leaning in close to his ear, he said he would reveal the truth. It was still a secret to everyone else. With his phone in hand, he asked if Chuno was watching too. The interview he had given right after the match had already been published. Everyone wanted to know what that automatic summoning was that he had shown. Since they wanted a plausible explanation for what their eyes had witnessed, they also wanted to know how he changed the trajectory of the spears. The head of the Blue Tower approached the boy and said he had the answer to those questions. Seeing that man, the protagonist was immediately surprised. He hadn't expected to see the Ice Demon King there. Kim said he had watched the match and was very intrigued, believing that the boy must have used a fourth circle spell, memorization. To explain his reasoning, he began to summon flames with one of his hands. The reporters were instantly captivated by it. Kim explained that memorization allows a spell to be prepared for instant casting. The reporters wanted to know why that isn't used more often. Kim said memorization only works with spells 3 levels lower. Asking the protagonist if he was correct, the boy replied that he was spot on. He hadn't known how to explain the technique he had learned, but that explanation was absolutely perfect. One of the reporters asked if the boy was really in the 4th circle of magic. Kim kept answering on his behalf, confidently asserting that the prodigy was indeed at the 4th level. The reporters didn't stop taking pictures and asking questions to all of them. Being at the 4th level at the protagonist's age is a major achievement, and with Kim's endorsement, few dared to doubt it. His best friend asked if it was really true, and also had a few more questions now. One of the reporters wanted to know how he had managed to ignore the rules of open source magic. Kim was already working hard to provide plausible answers, but the boy took over, saying that ignoring the rules of open source magic was surprisingly simple. He just had to alter the spell's formula, leaving Kim quite impressed, because it's supposedly impossible to alter a spell's formula. In other words, doing so is like putting wings on a car and expecting it to fly. Make it's possible, but it's definitely not easy. Then he started to think that if the boy were compatible with AI, he could have an impressive future ahead. At that moment, the protagonist was deeply distracted, explaining to reporters how his magic worked. The spells whose code he modified were named Modified Magic. Kim was also observing what the boy was doing, becoming even more interested in him, because that was undeniably revolutionary in the world of magic. Its very foundations had been shaken. That was exactly what the article was about. But the protagonist's best friend didn't buy into that narrative and wondered whether he should really believe what he had heard. Even struggling to accept the truth, he couldn't hide his joy. He was happy his friend had come out victorious. Now that they had spoken, he was going back to his dormitory. He needed to take care of his physical condition, as the opponent he faced the next day was a challenging one. Wondering who that person could be, the protagonist got lost in his thoughts. Once again, the duels resumed in the academy's arena. While being watched by the crowd, the protagonist's friends seemed to be having trouble. His opponent turned out to be formidable. Seated in the audience, our protagonist identified who his friend's opponent was. It was that typical blonde and talented girl who appears in every story. Her name was Adela Starrett, and at the moment, she was casting another spell. She was a prodigy of her family, representing 2 nations, France and Korea. At least they came up with an explanation for the blonde hair and blue eyes. Her magic was truly unique, and there was a reason for it. Lunar elemental magic, a secret technique of the girl's family. Our protagonist's friend was going through a rough time, and the blonde didn't wait long before attacking him again, causing the boy to fall to the ground. After a brief show of strength, the match was over. The girl was declared the winner of the fight. Our protagonist watched all of it with great attention. His eyes remained focused the entire time. That secret technique used both light and darkness. It wasn't registered in open code magic, so its range and power were unknown. Definitely, fighting her wouldn't be easy. That's when the boy started to feel like he was being watched. The blonde girl was staring straight at him. Our protagonist began to wonder if that was really happening. Later, he went to meet his friend, who was frustrated about the loss. Still, the protagonist congratulated him for his effort, but words couldn't cheer him up. He hadn't expected to face one of the toughest opponents right in the first round. Shaking off his sadness, he asked if the protagonist had won his second match, and he replied that he had. So now they knew who he'd be facing next. But their conversation was interrupted by the French girl, who also came to congratulate the protagonist's friend. He was very thankful for her words, but the girl was clearly focused on something else. Our protagonist still felt like he was being watched. She knew the boy was returning to the true path a mage should walk, one that must never be abandoned. As they talked, she decided to reveal the reason she enrolled in the academy, and she hoped the protagonist could help her with it. Our protagonist and the girl had known each other long before they entered that academy. Their families had a good relationship, which is why they had met several times, and the relationship between them was one of rivalry. The girl had left her studies in France just to surpass her small rival. However, everything changed when he revealed he was completely incompatible with AI, and ever since, they hadn't spoken again. That had been a major blow for her, as she would no longer be able to surpass the rival she had known her whole life. In a friendly tone, he said it was no longer worth it for her to see him as a goal to be overcome. Adela ignored those words and said they would confirm that only after they fought. The protagonist's friend became very worried, as he didn't know if the boy was ready for that. Given his carefree response, the boy grew even more concerned for our protagonist, because he wasn't aware of the rumors. That girl would be his next opponent in the competition. As soon as he found that out, our protagonist became a little concerned, because that wasn't something he had been expecting. Finally, another day of competition at the academy. The girl seemed extremely determined, ready to surpass her rival once and for all. Hale hadn't yet arrived at the arena, and some jealous students in the audience began saying he must have fled since he was scared to death. They said he was all talk, and when he realized he couldn't win, he decided to drop out of the competition. Indeed, his delay was already getting unreasonable, and the referee went to the arena to give his verdict. Adela had won due to the absence of her opponent. That was when the boy suddenly appeared, shouting and clearly anxious, apologizing for taking so long. The referee was visibly upset and asked why the boy had taken so long to get there. He said he would hear the explanation later, but there would be no time for him to rest. That would be his penalty for arriving late. The referee ordered the competitors to take their positions. Adela wanted to know why her rival had taken so long to arrive. Hale told her it was nothing serious. He had just been making a few preparations for the battle. Adela seemed intrigued by that answer. Recognizing her opponent's strength, our protagonist confirmed that to defeat her, some extra preparation was necessary. But that didn't convince the girl, who didn't believe he could have prepared that much in just one day. Even so, she could sense that the rival standing in front of her was no longer the same as the day before. He had changed. Maybe now she could finally witness the true power he possessed. Hale said he had a good piece of advice for her. She should go all out from the very start if she wanted any chance at winning. She seemed to take the advice, forming an energy sphere in her hands. Pointing her fingers at him, she began preparing to fire a blast of flames. The fire was materializing at her fingertips, like the barrel of a gun. Through other magical circles, she managed to multiply the spell. On the verge of being hit by those fireballs, our protagonist prepared a wind barrier, which successfully kept him from being hit by the attack. Using earth magic, Adela then managed to materialize a large needle. Right after that, several cracks started to appear in the arena floor. They were advancing toward the protagonist, and he was nearly hit by an explosion that erupted from the ground. To avoid being struck, he had to leap into the air. Adela saw it as a huge opportunity, as he wouldn't be able to dodge while airborne. She needed to make the most of this opening, and she was already fully prepared to strike him with another attack. Hale is fully aware of his current situation. His defenses are compromised. At least that's what most people would think. Our protagonist is not like most people. He managed to conjure a barrier beneath his feet, creating a solid platform. Many of the spectators were impressed by the use of such a high-level technique. Even the protagonist's rival was shocked, since he had turned a magic barrier into a platform, revealing his impressive genius. He is still the same, with a sensitivity to magic and strategy that few possess. To overcome the techniques of the secret moon, our protagonist must use everything he has. And if necessary, he'll bring the sun itself into this battle. A bright light began to shine, so intense it even blinded the blonde girl's eyes. As she tried to better see the source of the light, she began to wonder if it might be sunlight. Our protagonist was properly positioned right in front of her, and the girl knew an attack was coming. To defend herself, she summoned a large magic shield, and our protagonist was already prepared to land a decisive blow on his rival. Wind magic had formed a large sword in his hands, with which he struck the shield summoned by the blonde with great force. Our protagonist continued pressing hard. He was using first circle spells, while his rival used third circle ones. The attack couldn't destroy the barrier, and Adela began to think the boy was being overly cautious. Now he had returned to the ground of the arena, opening up a new opportunity for Adela to land an effective attack. But as soon as she tried to move, she noticed that one of her feet refused to budge. She hadn't realized that her foot had been completely immobilized while she was defending. Noticing that it was a form of earth manipulation, she tried to understand when her opponent had managed to do that. Maybe he had done it at the moment he landed on the arena floor. If that's the case, he relays incredibly fast. The blonde's eyes could barely keep up with what was happening. And while she was distracted by her thoughts, our protagonist had managed to get close to one of her flanks, now fully ready to maintain his offensive. This time, he would use water magic to attack the girl, who quickly destroyed the spell that had kept her foot stuck to the arena floor. But our protagonist had gained enough time to summon several water spheres, launching all of them toward the girl. Once again, Adela is relying on her magic barrier to stay in the fight. She's being heavily overwhelmed by her rival. Even during the battle, she's impressed by her rival's ability to manage so many elements. She began to recall Kim's words about our protagonist, that he uses a fourth circle spell, memorization. That made her believe he could only use first circle spells. Full of confidence, she was certain she wouldn't lose to such weak magic. But while lost in thought, something moved quickly through the air. It landed right next to the girl, causing a loud noise. It startled her since she hadn't seen any gaps in her defense. She assumed he had hidden one of his wind techniques, a modified spell, using the sun's excessive brightness to make it happen. Honestly, I didn't understand that attack. It just landed near the blonde and she's already acting like she got beaten up, for God's sake. Adela fell to the ground, looking up at her victorious opponent. Havel stared firmly at the girl, asking if she had forgotten who she was fighting against. Clenching her fists in fury, Adela looked completely unable to accept the result of the battle. That secretary was impressed by the boy's battle instincts. So as her superior, everything started when he dodged the girl's earth needle. It had all been planned. He had intentionally leaped into the air, encouraging Adela to keep attacking, using the sunlight to blind his opponent. Through memorization, he delayed the release of one of his wind spears. After hitting the ground, it continued to draw the girl's attention so she wouldn't look back up. He even immobilized her foot so she'd completely forget about what could come from the sky. When the moment was right, the final wind spear struck its target. A dramatic conclusion, but we know he's also wrong. Even so, he praised the boy's efforts. A great first circle mage, but the protagonist's father remained thoughtful, because even with those victories, his son was still at the first circle. They turned back to the arena. It seemed the fight wasn't over yet. The two youths were still standing, locked in an intense stare. The protagonist's father was irritated. His son, despite having the upper hand, hadn't finished the fight. So he concluded that the boy must be completely incapable of winning. At least that's what he believed, because Adela hadn't yet used her greatest trump card. Placing her hand over her chest, she said she was impressed. It reminded her of the old days. And now she would also fight her rival with all the strength she had. And that was exactly what our protagonist had been eagerly waiting for. The blonde's entire body began to shine intensely. That was the supreme attribute of the moon, the secret magic of the House of Mystics, the halo. Once she began performing her secret technique, several magic circles started to appear in the sky. The resulting energy was so powerful it began pushing the protagonist's body backward, forcing him to resist just to remain in place. The energy was so immense that it filled the entire sky above the arena, leaving the crowd deeply impressed. Inside the room reserved for important figures, the protagonist's father began sweating cold. He stood up and walked toward the exit. Kim asked if he was really leaving. The old man said the battle was already decided, there was no need to keep watching. But just as he finished those words, both were stunned by what unfolded in the fight. Even the secretary judged it to be completely impossible. While Kim couldn't hide a mix of shock and joy at what he was witnessing, the protagonist's friend was also completely in shock. But none of them were more surprised than Adela herself, because our protagonist had done something truly intriguing. That magic circle on his back, it was the flaming volcano. He had just shown them his second circle spell. It told the girl he had already warned her. He arrived late to the match because he needed to prepare to defeat her. She still believed that memorization was limited to first circle spells, and if he did that, it was possible he had already reached the fifth magic circle. But since that idea was completely unrealistic, our protagonist stayed silent. No one knew the truth yet. The night before, the students were heading to their dorms. Inside his room, Hagil was deeply focused, studying the mysterious book. He knew he wouldn't be able to defeat that girl using only first circle spells. And his fighting style isn't very compatible with the secrets of magic. His original plan was to wait until he matured and only then defeat her. But in the newly written pages of that book, he realized he could handle Sime. He received instructions to channel his magical power into the circle on the next page. The book said it would take him to a new domain. Intrigued by that guidance, he started thinking it could be some kind of mechanism. Since there was no reason to hesitate, he decided to give the unknown a chance, channeling his magical energy into that magic circle. Immediately, the book began to glow, leaving the boy deeply impressed, until the glow became so intense that it hurt his eyes. The energy being released was overwhelming. He could no longer look directly at the pages, until finally, everything stopped, leaving only the glowing pages of the book. When he was finally able to open his eyes, he realized that many things had changed. He was now in a different environment, filled with shelves and books like a library. Not recognizing the place, Hale began to wonder where he might be. A woman answered that question, welcoming him to the first page of the first challenge. The girl with the peculiar appearance is named Alpha, and she is the guide assigned to that page. These details were still very confusing to our protagonist. She confirmed that this was the first challenge within the Book of Idrid. But that information only made the boy more confused, realizing that he was inside the book. He hadn't been teleported to a faraway place. He was inside the mysterious book. If that's really true, it's unbelievable. In that challenge, they would see if the protagonist, Sime, had already been fully refined. He would receive instructions shortly after the beginning. If he could pass through pages 18 to 31, he would receive information about the second circle. Hale understood that he needed to overcome this in order to reach the next levels. Since the explanation had already been given, Alpha asked if they could begin. Filled with determination, Hale was eager to be tested, and now everything was going just as he wanted. The first challenge would begin immediately. A soft golden light began to envelop the girl's entire body. while our protagonist looked on, still very surprised. He couldn't tell what she was. She looked human, but he also couldn't rule out the possibility of her being a magical entity. A voice said it would explain how the challenge worked. Hale immediately recognized that voice. It was his teacher's. A gem made of light had appeared. It was called the elemental mana light. It was still incomplete, but contained 4 irregular mixed attributes. With the stone floating in his hands, Hale remained visibly stunned. His task was to completely purify the artifact. Faced with this challenge, he briefly began to doubt his capabilities. Because that type of artifact is very delicate, it requires manipulating mana with extreme caution. Inside it, the 4 types of mana existed in a chaotic state. And now he was entrusted with purifying it. It was like separating grains of sand, salt, and sugar after they had been completely mixed together. This was no easy task. Only those who had mastered the intent of the heart could purify it. Even so, refusing to give in to his insecurity, Hale realized that it was going to be a very interesting challenge. He immediately began using the intent of the heart to overcome it. Little by little, the completely mixed mana began to separate. This task demanded every bit of concentration the boy could muster. All this focus was being poured into overcoming it, and he continued separating the tiny particles of mana within the artifact. His task was nearly complete, but the difficulty kept increasing, until he was repelled by the artifact, crashing into the room's bookshelves. If the mana wavers even slightly, there's a shockwave. He needed to be even more careful. The mana was so entangled that separating them wasn't easy at all. After the first failed attempt, Hale reached an interesting conclusion, and now believed he could do it. He would try as many times as necessary, and time began to pass quickly. He kept trying. If he lost focus even a little, he had to start the entire process again, until he finally managed to purify the artifact. His teacher congratulated him for completing the first challenge, calling the boy once again his successor. For mastering the intent of the heart, the book would now be updated with instructions about the second circle. After those words, the protagonist's eyes suddenly opened. He was staring at the ceiling of his room, finally realizing that he had returned to the real world. His book had also gone through a few updates. Heading straight to the source of knowledge, Hale was eager to learn even more about the second circle. He knew the next match was approaching, and before it happened, Hale was confident he would be able to fully master the second circle, until finally the time for the match arrived. Very determined, Adela was using her family's secret technique, unleashing truly terrifying power. She believed that would be more than enough to secure her victory. Our protagonist had been engulfed by a massive pillar of light. His friend watched the fight and became worried, as it was possible that attack had ended the match. Even Adela believed it, turning her back on her opponent as she said the duel was over. But in her thoughts, she acknowledged that her rival had grown much stronger in a short period of time. She began to recall the rivalry between them, believing that the genius she once knew no longer existed. However, she was soon caught by surprise as a strange sound echoed through the arena. She looked back in shock, trying to understand what was happening. That was the second circle. Our protagonist was activating resonance. With blue flames in one hand and red in the other, he was still in the match. And now he would show everyone that there was still great potential in his career. Bringing both hands together, he fused 2 infinite circles. With free will, they would now become his hands and feet. Both Kim and the protagonist's father watched in total astonishment. They had no words to describe what they were seeing. Even the people in the audience were amazed, and the blonde girl was paralyzed, unable to understand any of it. Our protagonist was executing his techniques, and in addition to the magic circle on his back, 2 extra pairs of hands had appeared. He was now about to unleash the flaming volcano. Adela tried to react quickly to create a magic barrier. However, our protagonist had materialized a massive magic-powered machine gun. That's when the blonde realized she really should have gone to the bathroom before the duel started, because she was fully aware she wouldn't be able to block that attack. Even so, she was still determined to do whatever she could to keep fighting. For the first time in the entire story, her expression changed. Adela was genuinely happy because her rival had returned. Unfortunately, our protagonist didn't see her smile. He pulled the trigger without mercy. Even the referee was impressed by all that power. In an instant, everything he had summoned vanished within the arena. The protagonist's father and Kim still had nothing to say. The poor blonde girl could no longer stand on her feet because she had been completely defeated by our protagonist. Even though he had won, Hale nearly collapsed, completely exhausted. Only then did the referee declare that the match was over, naming Hale the victor. His father began to leave the room again, and the secretary asked if he was really going. The old man said he had other matters to attend to. With a sly smile on his face, Kim seemed to have understood everything, because that man was definitely not good at one thing: hiding lies. As soon as our protagonist left the arena, he ran into several people, but none of them were his focus right now. His body was completely drained. The second circle of resonance synchronizes with the intention of the heart from the first circle to amplify magic. And moon magic is a hybrid technique. It combines the reach of light magic with the power of darkness. This happens through small adjustments made with the dark element, altering its intensity. That way, he could narrow the attack's range, and he countered the halo with enhanced dark magic. Since moon magic is a secret technique restricted to members of the House of the Moon, not everyone can use it, but by briefly observing that technique, he understood its structure, managing delicate mana manipulation. This was only possible thanks to the resonance circle, purifying that artifact refined his mana control, which was crucial to his victory. While sitting and thinking, he noticed that students were gathering in another place. A man wearing glasses was approaching him. Finally, he had the chance to speak with the protagonist, which left the boy completely surprised, because standing before him was the master of the magic tower, and the man said he had come to speak directly with Hale. The two went somewhere else so they could talk more privately. He apologized for disturbing the boy, who must be very tired, but he had watched the duel, saying it had been an excellent battle. Hale thanked him for the compliment. Now the man was going to ask him a direct question based on things he had observed. He wanted to know if the boy had reached the fifth circle. Intimidated by the question, he remained silent for a few moments. And in fact, he had used second circle magic, and that man must be thinking he used the memorization technique. That's why he's probably assuming our protagonist reached the fifth circle because of the limitations of memorization. A bit embarrassed, he tried to explain saying that he hadn't reached the fifth circle yet. But the man's curiosity was immense. He wanted to know how the boy managed to use that last spell. Hale said the man wouldn't believe him if he found out he used vision magic. Recalling something he'd heard from the boy before, he thought he was referring to transformation magic, something that had already been mentioned in a previous occasion. Hale confirmed that assumption, but in truth, he didn't want to reveal what had really happened, so he adopted that version of the story. If he had truly reached the fifth circle at age 18, it would cause a huge stir in the world. Kim praised the boy's skill, though he still didn't understand how it related to second circle magic. The man asked many questions, but his doubts remained unanswered. Hale told him he had perfected the memorization spell. Those words left Kim deeply impressed. He could no longer hide his excitement, seeing that this was indeed a way of doing things. Realizing it was a remarkable strategy, his posture remained serious as he brought his hand closer to our protagonist, only to congratulate him because the boy had overcome a known weakness of the memorization spell. However, our protagonist was no fool. He noticed that the man's eye color had changed. They were now red. It was as if he was being completely analyzed. The eyes remained fixed on the boy, who started to feel extremely uncomfortable, because the man still hadn't removed his hand from the protagonist's shoulder, until finally he seemed to calm down, because he had confirmed that there were no mana traces on the boy's body corresponding to the fifth circle. Just as the boy's father had said, he hadn't gotten there yet. Summing it up, he said he understood everything and would give an explanation to the reporters. But his eyes remained intrigued with unanswered questions. The boy stood up from the armchair and thanked him, wishing the man a safe trip home. As he exited the room, he gave a respectful bow. But that brief interaction had left the boy very nervous. He hadn't expected the master of the magic tower to inspect him with the red jade eyes. It's said that the blue tower's master possesses those eyes. They can pierce the very essence of mana, making them the most powerful ocular detection technique. Our protagonist believes he got away without being exposed since the blue tower master didn't do anything. The techniques of Bait-Neo are his greatest asset, and he can't reveal them recklessly. More battles occurred throughout the exam, and our protagonist continued to accumulate victories. None of his opponents had been as challenging as the blonde girl. While walking through the corridors, someone called out for him to wait a moment. Turning around to see who it was, he realized it was Adela. He thought she was still unconscious, but the girl was already on her feet, saying she was fine. Hale asked her to skip the introductions. Adela said that if it wasn't a bother, she would like to receive some advice about the match. But since the final round hadn't happened yet, she said he could do it later, so he wouldn't get too tired. But that wasn't a problem for him. He said they could do it now. That would help him grow too, and he asked the blonde to follow him to the waiting room. She acknowledged that she still had much to learn in terms of strategy and magic use, and that one day she would reach that level too. Because she wanted to be like our protagonist. As the boy walked, he could feel the heat of her gaze. In the middle of the city, there was a tall mirrored building. It looked like the headquarters of some important place. Inside that building was a large residence. And watching our protagonist giving interviews, a girl thought all of this had already ended. The crest at the top of the building was the symbol of the Shin family, and the girl did not look pleased with what she saw on the news. That completely changed her plans, since she had believed everything had already been resolved. She asked if her brother was going to leave Hale alone. She is the eldest daughter of the family, Shin Sia, but since her name is too complicated, she'll be called Violetta from now on. Shin Jihan is the name of the man, and he asked what they should do under these circumstances. The girl doesn't want the protagonist to be accepted back into the family, saying her brother also knows how things were a year ago. She doesn't want to go through that kind of treatment again, but her brother told her not to worry. A year ago, the protagonist was still a great prodigy, but currently he's just trash capable of using second circle spells, and he asked if Violetta hadn't watched the matches too. What truly worries her is the notoriety he's gaining among people, with everyone saying the protagonist is amazing. She hadn't told her to pay close attention to what he was about to say. The opponents the protagonist faced so far were only third circle mages. He likely won't be able to defeat someone from the fourth circle. Besides, he has a catastrophic flaw since he's unable to use Ai and will almost certainly be unable to remain promising. No matter what he's done, he is far inferior to a fourth circle mage, and so are his skills. Violetta seemed more at ease seeing things that way, imagining that our protagonist would continue crawling on the ground. Even so, she couldn't get rid of all her insecurities, saying he might become a threat to the next head of the family. In that case, Jihan said they could take care of him. There's still time for that. The day was nearly over and twilight light bathed the arena. The floor of the place was heavily damaged, and a boy had collapsed to the ground, completely exhausted. That was enough for the referee, who declared the end of the match. And the champion among the second-year students was Shin Hale, who began receiving applause from the audience. Mei began saying the prodigy had finally returned, and that it was expected from someone of his family to do something like that. Even without using AI, he had managed to come out victorious, further increasing his fame as a genius. His friend kept cheering in the crowd, saying our protagonist was truly amazing. Approaching him, he said everyone wouldn't stop talking about the boy's skills. He was being recognized by all. But there were also those who could only feel envy, saying the protagonist was nothing without using forbidden magic. Their teacher was also very proud of the result achieved. Hale's friend asked if the teacher was going to take the students out to celebrate, and that was exactly what he had in mind. Knowing there would be celebrations, they got even more excited, until our protagonist said he would really like to go too, but he had a very important commitment that immediately ruined his best friend's enthusiasm. He said it wouldn't be a party without the guest of honor, but Hale insisted it was important. As he rushed out, he apologized once again for it. Already in the city, he knew he had to keep that promise, until he finally found what he was looking for. Next to a limousine, a man said they had been waiting for him, the youngest son of the Shin family. The head of the family was already expecting him, and the boy would be taken to the main residence. Night fell, and they finally arrived at the protagonist's destination. For a brief moment, he stood in front of that massive gate. It had been a year since the last time he was there, because he had rebelled against his father after being declared incompatible with AI and was forbidden from ever entering that place again. And due to his recent achievements, he had entered there once more. Observing the interior of that room, he realized nothing had changed, everything was just as he remembered. He took a few more steps into the massive hall, and came face to face with a large pair of doors. On the other side of that room was his father's office. Finally, after all his effort, he had made it back to that place. Once in front of the door, he knocked lightly to announce his arrival. And indeed, the head of the family was already waiting for the protagonist to arrive. The old man stared at the door attentively and granted the visitor permission to enter, until our protagonist finally opened the door. Once inside the office, the boy showed his respect and said it had been a while since the last time he was there with his father. The old man told him to sit down. As they talked, he said he used to think of the boy as a failure. For God's sake, what pathetic father, because it took him 20 times longer to cast his spell, and they would disappear if he lost focus, incapable of doing more than one thing at a time. He said his son was the perfect example of how useless a person could be. This guy's definitely winning Father of the Year, for God's sake. Even so, everyone acknowledged our protagonist's exceptional talent, so he suggested the boy use AI to bring out the full extent of his potential. He didn't have high expectations for it. He saw it as a desperate move. After that free humiliation session, our protagonist said he understood everything. The old man believed that after that newspaper article, his son would come to his senses after being defeated. But things turned out differently. His expectations were completely shattered, because the boy had mastered magic transformation, and he had won that bet between them. The protagonist's combat performance was worthy of a real mage. The boy's eyes began to shine after hearing those words. He genuinely thanked his father, since he's a huge attention beggar, and the old man confirmed that from this point on, the family would give him all the support he needed to grow. The boy should say everything necessary to keep developing. He could even live there again. Since he would be the next successor of the whole family, he needed to do a good job. Our protagonist smiled brightly, because aside from attention, it would be very convenient to get a fat inheritance. But the old man still had one last warning to give. If he suspects that the boy is stagnating or regressing in his progress, he would personally destroy his magic circles. Frankly, this guy tries really hard to be a bad dad. It would have been better if he had just been absent. Our protagonist felt intimidated by the pressure of an 8th circle mage. This was his last chance. He agreed to his father's absurd condition. Sitting back down in the chair, the old man asked what the boy's goal was. He said that at one point he did wish to become the head of the family, but he's way behind the other siblings, who were already dedicated to that mission. Our protagonist said that remains his greatest goal, nothing less than that. He'll make everyone in the family recognize him. The old man wants to know how the boy plans to carry out this plan, so he showed something on the table, saying he would be participating in it, the worldwide academy competition that would take place in 2 months. He said he would return home with a gold medal. This competition is exclusively for students under 20 years old. It happens every year and is known as the Magic Olympics. The competition level is high, comparable to professional leagues. The old man said the country's record was a silver medal, won by the leader of the Blue Tower, something that happened several years ago. Then he said the boy's goal sounds completely delusional. My God, this guy is a master of healthy motivation. But our protagonist wasn't fazed. He said he had one condition for his father. He asked that over the next 2 months, his father prevent his siblings from interfering with him because it would harm his training. The old man not only doubted the boy could win a gold medal, he now realized the kid was asking for immediate protection. Normally, he would reject a request like that, but he admitted it might actually be a good idea. The day finally dawns, and several books are scattered across the bedroom floor. Our protagonist fell asleep right there. He couldn't even walk 1.5 meters to sleep in a comfortable bed. Opening his eyes slowly, he realized he had fallen asleep without even noticing. As soon as he returned from his family's house, he started digging into the requirements for the second test. Even though he had overcome the first challenge, he needed to master the third circle, and for that he had to complete the second test. Unfortunately, he's completely lost. The only clue he has is resonance. Maybe he has to raise his level until it becomes consonance, the full refinement of the second circle. At least that's what he's going to try as he's working to understand the principles of consonance. The clues given in the book said he needs the circle of judgment and the circle of resonance to connect organically. Our protagonist began trying to put that into practice. The circles were connected, but in an imperfect way. This is the crossroads he finds himself in. Since his mind was too occupied with it, he decided to go for a walk to clear his thoughts. He decided to head to the city center. Breathing in the fresh air and seeing the buildings around, he immediately felt relieved. Now he believes he's much more capable of reaching full resonance. While he was deep in thought, someone told him to be careful. Looking to the side, an object was approaching his face dangerously fast. But his reflexes didn't react in time, and he was hit by the object. A girl approached, asking if he was okay, and our protagonist complained that it hurt a little. Looking ahead, he seemed to recognize that figure, because it was Adela standing before him now. The two began walking together, and he asked why that plastic bag had flown into his face. She said she had been swinging the bag cheerfully because she was going to drink banana milk, but ended up losing control and it flew off, hitting the boy's face. Finally understanding what had happened, he saw the girl start apologizing. Despite that, he was grateful, since he was also going to drink banana milk, and asked if she still only drank that. Revealing a bag full of it, the girl said it was the perfect drink. She also said she had heard some rumors that the boy had returned to his family's home. He confirmed that to her, saying he had returned to the magic tower the day before. The blonde said that was a great relief and asked if he still dreamed of becoming the head of the magic tower. A bit confused, our protagonist asked if he had ever said something like that. She recalled the conversations they had when they were kids, saying they talked about that topic a lot. But our protagonist no longer dreams of that sort of thing. Adela was very surprised by those words, wanting to know if he had accepted responsibilities tied to his family's reality. Since he has many siblings, becoming the head wouldn't be an easy task, and Hale found it strange that she was thinking about that so seriously. He said that his current dream is to become the master of magic, to become the pinnacle of the subject above all other magic towers. That is his new goal, which left the girl very impressed, since that is something almost beyond imagination, given how difficult it is. And being someone who sees him as a rival, things just became even more challenging. At the main house of our protagonist's family, people are very anxious. Violetta can't stop biting her nails while thinking about all the things that might happen. She slammed her hands on the table to talk to her brother. She asked if he wasn't worried about what had happened, and the boy said the old man must have had his own reasons. But he was also thoughtful, because it was hard for him to believe in those conditions. The night before, they had been summoned by the family head for a conversation. Knowing he's an exemplary father, he already understands the personalities of the two degenerates, and he had an order for both of them. For the next 2 months, they were not to interfere with the protagonist's life in any way. Violetta was immediately outraged, but her brother asked her to keep talking. He wanted to know what had motivated their father to do such a thing. The best father in the galaxy said they should already know that the youngest son had returned to the family. He's still in development and is a year behind the others. He claimed that 2 months would be necessary for him to adapt to this exemplary family. And he knows that those two shining examples of morality and human decency in front of him could cause problems. For a brief moment, the boy went silent, showing how angry he was, until he agreed with his father's request, wanting to know if there was anything else. The old man said they must be tired and told them to disappear, because a good son is a distant son. Violetta wanted to know why they left that place without questioning the family head's orders, but she quickly became frightened by what she was feeling. Because her brother couldn't hide the rage he was feeling, accepting that order was very difficult. Minhyuk and Minji are the other siblings who seem to be more rational and aren't invested in this competition, so they weren't summoned. But he can't accept the privilege the youngest son had received. If it were the traditional old man he had known, he would never have granted such a favor. Every child should fend for themselves. That's the old man's motto. So he can't understand why the old man, best father in the galaxy, suddenly started behaving like a father for the first time in his life. Violetta is theorizing a few things, wondering if the old man already knows everything. Her brother said that's not it, because the youngest son hasn't shown enough to be the successor yet. Even so, it's possible he demonstrated some interesting potential. Or maybe the old man is just interested in the mysterious magic the youngest son is capable of using, or perhaps he made a deal. Violetta becomes worried, imagining what kind of deal they could have made. And that might be right, because the old man doesn't act that way and his face seems desperate. She's already thinking about ordering her lackeys not to follow the youngest brother, but the treacherous brother said that might be a problem. Since his father has followers who operate from the shadows, intelligence unit that serves directly under the head of the family, If he finds out anything, it'll be a problem. The treacherous one has already pulled all surveillance off his brother to avoid issues. Violeta wants to know what he plans to do now, so he said he was going to take action. He can't let his brother get that kind of advantage. He needs to consult the Black Tower immediately. Another school day is underway at Obelisk Academy. The teacher says the evaluations are over and congratulates her students, announcing that first place belongs to that class. She asked our protagonist to stand so he could be applauded. Among all 17-year-olds in the country, he was the best of them all. Now that he's in first place, he could hold that position for 2 more months and compete in the Academy Olympics. And that's exactly what our protagonist is planning to do. The jealous ones are quick to say he's too ambitious, because in 2 months he'll definitely lose the reputation he worked so hard to earn. Even hearing those words, the boy doesn't let himself be shaken. He has the mental resilience of someone who grew up with the best dad in the galaxy. That's why he remains confident. His friend is stretching outside, relieved that class is finally over. He hates going through theoretical lessons, and our protagonist says that tomorrow will be practical training, which is why they should keep exercising, since his friend's body is still way too weak. Even hearing that comment, he agrees with the statement. Unfortunately, he can no longer joke around saying the protagonist is weak, and Hale said he should put in some effort to get stronger too. Something the boy is willing to do just so he can beat up his friend. With all that determination, he suggested they head to the training room after dinner. But his friend wasn't thrilled with the idea, and our protagonist asked what was with that confused expression. He said he's out of shape right now, so he'll have to leave it for another time. Hale told him he could have just said no. He didn't have to make up an excuse. His friend said he doesn't like working out with the protagonist, which offended him a bit, until the boy revealed that he finds his training a little scary. Even the others' expressions are puzzled. Our protagonist is doing squats with a ridiculous amount of weight. He must have some dirty little secret, maybe a hidden syringe or something. Even with all that weight, our protagonist does multiple reps, leaving everyone impressed. Some recognize him as the one who took first place in the evaluations. After finishing his exercise, he carefully set the weights down. He'd been so focused on improving his magic that he ended up neglecting his physical training, saying he had lost the touch. After hydrating a bit, he started thinking about the notes from the book. The infinite circle is related to the body, and it interacts with physical training. When both are strong, they become more efficient. That's why he also needs to commit to physical training. But carrying all that weight, he must really have a dirty secret. Maybe he's making love to protein shakes. Inside that building, there's a 3-eyed beast that looks like a panther. Those Digimons are part of the protagonist's training. The creatures charge at him, flashing sharp claws and dangerous fangs. But the boy dodges the first attacks with great ease. Everything is crystal clear to his well-trained eyes. Taking the opportunity to strike some of the digitized creatures. As they're hit, they begin to vanish. The protagonist's movements are so well crafted that he manages to confuse the creatures, creating chances to obliterate each one of them with his flames. With his final attack, he struck 2 more, leaving just 1 Digimon to be incinerated. His training is finally complete. The instructor would now give the boy his results. His performance was absolutely flawless. Knowing that, our protagonist was thrilled. While sitting on a bench, he started thinking about his situation. Thanks to the infinite circle, his physical abilities have been enhanced by about 1.5 times. Once he reaches the 3rd circle, he'll become even stronger, so he needs to refine the infinite circle. Closing his eyes, he began to concentrate. He needed all his focus. He was trying to perfect the circles he had already mastered, making mana flow through his body, making precise adjustments to the rotation of each circle, gradually increasing the purity of the mana circulating between them. He was close to synchronizing both, but the boy still isn't able to do that, and it's an extremely exhausting task. He had reached 99%, stalled at the final stage before synchronization could be completed. Despite his many failed attempts, he didn't get discouraged at all. After all, if being the son of the best father in the galaxy didn't break him, nothing else would. Still part of his training, he started running outside. Our protagonist was listening to his favorite songs to make the exercise easier, until he began approaching a street corner. Just as he was about to turn, he saw a hooded man on the other side. The man tried to hit him in the face with a strike, but our protagonist's reflexes were incredibly sharp, and he managed to dodge it, immediately asking who the person trying to hit him was. No words were needed, he quickly recognized the identity of the man. It was Sakyuk, the one who had just tried to attack him. The man tried to strike again, but his blow didn't land on the protagonist. Pulling off a mask on his face, he said the boy was really good at dodging like a rat. Picking up one of his earbuds that had fallen to the ground, our protagonist asked why he had returned home, saying he didn't return because he couldn't, provoking the boy with that truth. Since he was under evaluation, he wasn't allowed to leave the academy, and Bake was getting even more irritated. Our protagonist said that after Bak used his family's influence, all he managed to do was screw himself even harder, saying that the bastard had nowhere left to go. Summoning fire magic, he had already lost emotional control and said he was going to end the protagonist, who now realized how serious the situation was. That degenerate was about to attack him in the middle of the street using magic. Bake charged forward furiously, determined to destroy the promising future of a spoiled rich kid. His attacks were far too slow for the protagonist, who dodged and grabbed him by the shirt. Bake realized his attack had been completely intercepted, and it didn't take long before he was thrown to the ground like a child. Our protagonist stared down at him firmly while listening to the desperate screams of that pathetic creature. He ended up using it as a great opportunity. The boy was subdued, yet continued to threaten the life of our protagonist. He told the suited man that he had to suppress him since he had been attacked with magic, and all of it had been recorded by the security cameras. Our protagonist said he couldn't believe the audacity of that insolent being, and the man told him to go rest. Everything would be resolved at the academy. Meanwhile, the bastard was being shoved into a car. Looking at him, Hale was hoping the bastard would stay just like that. Finally, morning came at Obelisk Academy. Several students were reading a bulletin that had been published that same day. Beck had been harshly penalized for using offensive magic in the middle of the street. Even so, he only lost 10 points when in reality he should have been expelled. Our protagonist had already expected an outcome like that, since the bastard's family is really wealthy and they make large donations to the academy. Maybe Beck is being punished now, but all the boy received was a phone call from someone clearly furious about his actions. The bastard began apologizing to his father, who had already warned him to stay quiet until he graduated, and began asking him if that was really such a difficult task to fulfill. His graduation is necessary for them to receive a noble title, so the boy has to cooperate. Ending the call, he said he would keep that in mind. But the truth is that the boy is still very stressed about the situation. He hated being outdone by the protagonist, who defeated him in a humiliating fashion. He can no longer contain the hatred he feels in his chest. Little by little, that feeling is turning into a very strange obsession, since the spoiled brat believes everything is the protagonist's fault. As he crushes his phone underfoot, he keeps telling himself it's Hale's fault. One of the teachers approached the boy, noticing that he holds a strong grudge against the protagonist. The spoiled boy wanted to know what the instructor was doing there, saying he decides for himself who he likes or not. The instructor acknowledged that everyone has the right to make that decision in life. Getting even closer to the spoiled one, he asked if he didn't want to get revenge on the protagonist. His first reaction was one of great surprise, but the old man wanted to know, wasn't that exactly the kind of thing he was longing for? Meanwhile, our protagonist continued to be a diligent student doing his studies. He was considering questioning the academy's stance on the incident he went through, but ended up gaining something in return. At that exact moment, he had just received an email. It was from his father. The negotiation with the Back family had ended. Because of the incident, they gained 3% of the mining rights the Back family holds over a mine. The head of the family wants to know if our protagonist would like to receive some sort of reward for this. To receive a noble title, the Back family also needs to maintain good relations with others. And the concession they made was the right one after all. They messed with the most important person in this story, the protagonist. This only emphasizes how important the noble title is to that family. The title separates the families. Stakeyov ended up being expelled from his because of the actions he took. Thinking that everything was now resolved, our protagonist decided he would refine his techniques a bit more. The next day, life goes on normally at the academy. Hale is thinking that the instructor's control over the students has gotten stricter because of the incident, and one of the instructors came to speak with him directly. This is the same person who's favoring the spoiled brat, so he approached our protagonist in a friendly manner, while watching him with treacherous eyes without the boy suspecting a thing. He said he had noticed it. Seems like Hale doesn't like him. Our protagonist was caught off guard and almost admitted that he really didn't. The instructor said that it's understandable since he had been hard on him several times, but his words were sincere advice and asked not to be misunderstood. That was so bizarre that Hale started wondering what might be going on that he still doesn't know. The instructor extended his hand asking to start over. Still a little embarrassed, he was about to thank him. But before touching his hand, he felt something dreadful. An uncomfortable sensation was running through his entire body. All of this while the instructor was still congratulating our protagonist on his performance in the competition. Hale noticed that the man seemed completely calm, but something was very wrong. Now he could see what was surrounding that instructor, a sinister aura. Not knowing exactly what it could be, he thought it might be dark power. The Black Tower is a well-known place in this world. Unlike the other towers, it's unofficial and follows a different path. It's made up of criminals who serve the Dark Mage. Our protagonist never imagined that this instructor could be affiliated with them in any way. It's possible other infiltrated mages are inside the academy too. But that's not his priority right now. First, he needs to understand the formula of that magic to be better positioned in this situation. He immediately used his ability to analyze the phenomenon. That magic felt somewhat familiar. He realized it was a mind control spell. But our protagonist already knows that his brain is completely immune to external interference. So this mind control spell certainly won't work on his brain. Thanks to his innate ability, he'll be able to survive this challenge. People around him still haven't noticed anything, which made him think about his next move. He's going to pretend to be affected by the spell in order to extract as much information about the Black Tower as he can. Our protagonist opened his eyes with an apathetic look. The instructor believed his technique had worked perfectly, saying the boy was a cripple who couldn't use AI, yet would still make an excellent pawn. Leaning toward the boy's ear, he asked him to listen carefully to these instructions. He should carry that object from now on without questioning the reason behind it. Pretending to be under his control, he said he would do as told. But the instructor had one more question. He wanted to understand how the boy's unique magic worked. Pretending to feel a sharp discomfort in his head, the boy said he couldn't answer that. The instructor interpreted that reaction as the subconscious mind's desire to keep things hidden. He told him not to try answering, prompting the boy to behave normally again. Mind control magic has a very specific function. It interferes with the target's emotions to control them effectively. It's a technique used by the Black Tower. When used by an advanced caster, it can destroy the target's mind, making it a dangerous and forbidden spell. Extracting memories from a mind with strong willpower can be fatal. Since the instructor gave up on the question, our protagonist realized his goal must be something else. Even so, the man revealed that he was upset. He wanted to exploit that privileged information, but he couldn't let his mission fail. He said that once it was done, he would remove the vision magic from that boy, and after saying that, he placed his fingers. Our protagonist pretended to have regained consciousness, and the instructor began speaking to him. He asked if everything was alright, since the boy had seemed off during their conversation. It could be due to exhaustion. They quickly said their goodbyes, with the instructor advising that a boy should get some rest. It didn't take long for the instructor to vanish into the crowd. But our protagonist is more determined than ever to reach the truth. He continued on his path while his classmates headed to the cafeteria. Hadel sat on one of the benches in the academy garden to examine what he had received. He observed that small chip very carefully. It was an illegally distributed AWAKENS. Someone must be trying to frame him as an illegal user. Their goal is to destroy the boy's public reputation. But that instructor has no real motive to ruin him, even if their relationship isn't the best. So someone must have made a request to the Black Tower. Even with this information, he still can't fully analyze the situation. Maybe it was the work of the spoiled brat, but he's already so screwed, it might be unlikely. It could be that one of his siblings is behind it, trying to eliminate him from the succession race. Minji isn't part of that race, so she lacks any real motivation. In-hyuk wants to be the family head, but he's never seemed like the type to do something like this. That leaves the two degenerates, who might be working together to sabotage the protagonist. The boy immediately thought about capturing the instructor and interrogating him gently, but that would attract the attention of the Black Tower, which definitely wouldn't be good for his current situation. Faced with all the possibilities, he needs to keep thinking about how to protect himself. To get a few more answers, he went to Earth's Blue Magic Tower, heading to the office of the one who leads it. He was immediately received upon arrival. Kim wanted to know what had brought such a talented young man to his office, and his gaze showed both interest and caution in that interaction. Hale noticed that Master Kim seemed much colder than usual. Even so, this was the chance he had to ask for help. Kim told the boy not to behave as if he were a burden in front of him, and our protagonist knew he had to take advantage of this opportunity. And apparently, just like the rumors say, he must be deeply involved in some research. That's likely why he's acting this way. That's the very question our boy asked, and Kim replied that he was studying either a magical or ordinary stone, and it was taking up more of his time than he had planned. Looking at the artifact, our protagonist instantly recognized it. This was a rare opportunity, and he had to take full advantage of it. Once they sat on the sofa, Kim asked him to get straight to the point since he was busy. Not hiding his own curiosity about what had brought the boy there to discuss something in person. Seeing that he was becoming a little hysterical, our protagonist started to worry that he might ignore everything he was about to see. And before getting to the main topic, he said he had something to tell him. About the artifact he was researching, that peculiar stone, the elemental crystal. Kim was immediately surprised to hear that coming from the boy, and now he wanted to know how he knew about it, since its name hadn't been revealed to anyone. From this point on, the boy had to speak very carefully. Kim was furious, thinking the information might have leaked somehow, and the boy said he hadn't done any such thing. Opening his backpack, he said there was a very simple reason why he knew what it was, because he also had an artifact just like that one, which left Kim even more impressed, because the version the boy had was already perfectly purified. Kim couldn't dodge the question. He wanted to know if the boy was the one who had done it. Our protagonist confirmed that he had purified the artifact himself. The leader of the Blue Tower, upon hearing that, became very uneasy. No matter how talented the boy was, it should have been impossible. The greatest craftsman in that world, even the master of the Blue Tower himself, couldn't produce an artifact like that. And now a simple student was standing before him claiming he had done it alone. Kim wanted to gather more information, so he asked if the boy had brought the artifact with him. Hadel said he brought it because he knew only a magic tower would have something similar. Kim was very interested in knowing how the boy had obtained such an artifact. But our protagonist didn't give the full answer. He said it was pure chance and luck. The man approached him in a much more friendly manner, saying the boy must be blessed with extraordinary luck, because he recognizes that mages must have their own secrets. That's part of who they are. So he wouldn't pressure the boy for any additional information. But he was very interested in examining that artifact a bit more closely, something our protagonist allowed. Looking at it more carefully, he said it was the only one of its kind to possess all four elements simultaneously. Returning the item to the boy, he asked what the purpose was in bringing it. Our protagonist said he hoped he could use that item to craft another artifact. Intrigued by the request, he wanted to know what kind he was talking about. Could it be clothes or accessories? maybe even a weapon. For Hale, it could be anything that increases the efficiency of elemental magic. Kim understood the request and began to think about it. To create something like that, he'd need extremely high-quality materials. The cost would be very high, so he asked if the boy could afford it. Until he remembered the boy came from a wealthy family and that they'd probably cover all the expenses, but our protagonist said that would be unacceptable. He wants the project to remain completely secret from his family and from anyone else in this land. Revealing the cost of his work, Kim wanted to know how a boy planned to pay that amount, and whether he'd be able to afford it without family support. Hale said he had something else in mind, an alternative method of payment. He would craft a stone like that one right in front of the Tower Master. Kim asked if the boy was seriously saying he'd teach him the method to create that rare item. Because if that was the proposal, it was very interesting. He might even throw in something extra, given how big that payment would be, which made Hale ask if he could also request something else. Now much more friendly, Kim was willing to listen to what kind of request that might be. With a small object in hand, he brought it closer to the master of the magic tower, who immediately recognized the chip as illegal, asking at once how the boy had gotten it. For a brief moment, he was very hesitant. He said that a mage from the Black Tower, infiltrated in the academy, had given it to him. Faced with the presence of these infiltrated mages, he went to the Blue Tower to ask him for help. The full moon shines in the night sky. Our protagonist had received a ride back home. He told the driver to get back safely. Without saying goodbye, the secretary informed him that they would be meeting again very soon. As she drove away, the boy watched her vanish into the horizon. After a very intense day, he finally managed to lie down in his bed to rest. His luck that day had been exceptional. He hadn't imagined that Kim was researching that item. Thanks to that, he could continue keeping the secret from his father to make this new artifact. His plan had been to obtain the mining rights from the Back family, but now he has to wait a bit longer. His eyes are extremely tired and the kiss of Morpheus draws near. At the Blue Tower, Kim remains deep in thought because he knows that security at Obelisk Academy is very efficient. Even so, dark mages managed to infiltrate that place. The only evidence he received of that accusation was the chip and the word of a single student. Even though it was a serious accusation, there wasn't enough material to validate the hypothesis. Normally, he wouldn't take action based on the suspicion of just one student, but things are different with the protagonist and he decided to take the risk. While on the phone, someone asked if he arrived safely. He confirmed yes and said they should proceed with a plan. Our protagonist continues on his path patiently. They told him not to worry about anything as long as the information is accurate. The magic tower doesn't make mistakes. Inside the elevator, Hale said he was placing his trust in them and that he would be in touch soon. The young man is now in another hall, and he announced his arrival to those waiting for him. Seated at the table are all his siblings who grew up in that wonderful home full of warmth and understanding, without a trace of rivalry. Minji reacted very warmly, saying it had been a long time since the last time. He agreed with her words, saying his sister hadn't changed at all. She took that as a compliment, saying her little brother had grown up a lot and would soon be taller than Inhyuk. That brother was also being very friendly, telling her not to say such ominous things about his height. He welcomed the protagonist, acknowledging that it was hard to feel completely happy, but welcomed him nonetheless. The boy thanked him, thinking to himself that his older brother still gets straight to the point, just like always. Minji quickly scolded that behavior, but the boy had no idea what he might have done wrong. Only two were left to speak to, those with hearts full of love. Jihan and Violetta, who often conspire against the protagonist. Jihan said he was looking less and less like a child and already resembled a man. Violetta also told him it had been a long time since they last met. While they smiled outside, he was sure his siblings were conspiring against him, which made him think the culprit had to be in that room. The oldest told him to sit down and start eating, saying he was curious to know what had motivated the youngest to gather them all, because he was certain it wasn't anything special. Our protagonist said he just wanted to see everyone one more time, which is why he organized that meeting. Violetta was surprised by how trivial the meeting was. But Hale was already prepared, saying that if he hadn't arranged it, his older siblings would have done it anyway, which only made Violetta even more bitter and furious. Completely giving in to her anger, she demanded the brat reveal what he was really planning. He played dumb, and Violetta told him to stop acting like an idiot because she knew he wanted to be the heir. Hale warned that even if he said right there that he wasn't interested, no one would believe him. Once again, Violetta was deeply irritated, and the protagonist said there was no point in saying such things since no one would believe it, which made his sister even more unhinged. Jihan asked her to calm down a bit. Words don't prove much in matters like this, not as much as actions do. He said he was interested in his brother's transformation magic and asked if he would like to share it with the family. Our protagonist immediately saw the foolishness in his older brother. Sharing that would be the same as giving up the race for succession, which is something he isn't willing to do now. Charming as ever, he said that secret is his only hope. Since he can't become a mage through AI modernization, this is his last chance to achieve his dreams. He said it's not about the succession race, which moved his polite sister deeply, while Jihan was left speechless. The other two also looked a bit lost upon hearing those words. Minji seemed very affectionate, even wiping the tears from her younger brother's face, while the clueless brothers said they should forget about the competition for a moment and just relax a little. Minji agreed with the suggestion as she wanted to hear more about Hale's life. It didn't take long for desserts to arrive at the table. Apparently, everyone was chatting in a relaxed way, sitting at the same table. While time passed, the clock showed the hours going by. Our protagonist realized that some time had passed and he should begin to act. His phone began to vibrate. A shocking piece of news was being spread. They all picked up their phones to read it. Minji had no idea what might be happening, while the clueless brother said it was really urgent. Even Violetta looked worried, as she hadn't expected something like that at that moment. And the rage on Jihan's face was very noticeable, because he clearly didn't like what he had read. The message said that one of the academy instructors was affiliated with the Black Tower and had been immediately arrested. After reading the news, they all returned to acting normally. But our protagonist believed he had finally found the culprit behind everything that had happened, because his older brother's expression showed discomfort. Observing him more carefully, he started to wonder if his brother was the mastermind behind the whole plan. Later that same day, his brother spoke to someone on the phone saying that our protagonist had been right all along. With the phone in hand, he was reading more details about the arrest of the criminal instructor. After everything that had happened, Kim had even more questions for the boy. He wanted to know how he had figured out that the instructor would tamper with the academy's training materials. He said he had made a simple logical deduction based on the information he had gathered. Surely the instructor would act inside the academy since he had infiltrated it. Considering mind control and that week's schedule, he could only act on one day, Friday, the day of the survival exam. He would certainly try something during the assessment, and to do that, tampering with the materials would be the first step. Its actions would need to happen before the inspection of the materials. That left only one possible day for it to happen, the day before the exam, Thursday. The Blue Tower was already monitoring the room where the materials were stored. And at the same time, the protagonist gathered all of his siblings to figure out who had orchestrated that plan. As a result of all his actions, the instructor had been arrested. In addition, the boy started to suspect that his older brother might be involved in it. Hale executed the plan flawlessly, gathering information without compromising himself. His actions were impeccable. His only regret is not being able to link his brother to the instructor's actions. Kim said he wanted to help the boy this time, but ended up being helped by him instead, since the reputation of the Blue Tower had risen significantly. He said he wouldn't forget to repay this favor, something a boy in his current position couldn't refuse. Kim appreciated his sincerity and ended the call, saying he would take care of the remaining matters, while our protagonist asked him to remain cautious. Right as the call ended, a massive explosion occurred on the avenue where the protagonist was standing. The shockwave threw him far away. As he tried to get up, he still couldn't say for sure what just happened. In the middle of the smoke, there was someone who kept repeating his name. It was the spoiled brat who had said goodbye to his sanity and now wanted to end the protagonist's life. Seeing the spoiled kid completely out of control, our protagonist began sweating in concern. It didn't take long before the boy started attacking with everything he had. He had nothing left to lose. Hale realized the attack was too fast. He needed to react immediately. The first strategy he used was to expand his resonance to the maximum. That was enough for him to conjure a water shield, which would be effective at blocking the fireballs. But it didn't take long for him to realize that the attacks were far too powerful. It was only a matter of time before his defense collapsed. His focus now was to restore the shield he had created, buying himself time to react. He managed to strengthen it, just enough to ensure the attack wouldn't be fatal. Even so, when the two spells collided, a massive explosion erupted. Our protagonist's body was hurled far, eventually crashing against a nearby streetlight. Looking at his hands, he saw they were scorched. He hadn't been able to fully dodge the attack. On the other side, the spoiled brat was overly confident in his superiority and now intended to deal with his enemy. He said the protagonist was nothing but a defective piece of trash and would get what he deserved while crawling on the ground. This entire incident was still extremely troubling for Hale. While observing his enemy, he noticed something was off about the boy's body. His gaze was unrecognizable, his eyes blood red. There was also a very visible flush on his skin. It was clearly reddened. These are clear symptoms of an adverse reaction. He had definitely taken a drug that induces a loss of control. It forcibly accelerates mana flow, causing blood vessels to rupture, making the user appear covered in blood, and most importantly, they will fight until they die. He asked if the spoiled brat was actually insane, but with a look only a madman could make. He replied that he was perfectly fine. Quickly analyzing his opponent, he noticed he was at the third circle, burning his mana non-stop. Finally, the spoiled brat managed to lay hands on our protagonist. He tried to break free while calling him crazy. But the brat insisted again that he was perfectly normal, more normal than he had ever been in his life, because now he was going to end his enemy's life. Using a point-blank flame spell, Flame Infection. After the attack, thick smoke and soot began to rise into the air. The spoiled brat looked at the ground, staring at the protagonist's fallen body. He was impressed that his victim was still alive, but that only made him angrier, since our protagonist had managed to block his magic twice. He couldn't accept that a defective piece of trash was capable of that and started demanding to know how he could have so much skill, until he began screaming as if he were completely out of control. After that outburst, his behavior shifted entirely. He said this kind of thing just happens. Hale knew that this kind of sudden mood swing is typical of someone using that uncontrollable enhancement drug. Even so, many things still didn't add up in this situation. The first is the excessive power the spoiled boy was able to use while attacking. No matter how much of the drug he had taken, his power shouldn't have increased that drastically. He wondered if he should examine the situation more carefully, and noticing he was being watched, the spoiled brat asked what he was staring at. Without giving any answer, our protagonist summoned a large dome of wind, launching several attacks in the direction of the spoiled brat, who became furious once again, saying that magic was as useless as its user. Our protagonist reflected that he should have been more careful when using his wind magic. Even so, he hadn't expected such a good opportunity to attack. He was already close to the spoiled brat with a racing gun in his hands. It happened so quickly that his opponent couldn't react. The protagonist's attack was already in motion. The poor spoiled brat could only be impressed. There was little he could do at that distance. Our protagonist believed it was a clean hit. There was no way he could have dodged it. However, the spoiled brat was using fire magic at close range, which could have a disastrous result for the flow of the fight, and the unhinged one shouted with glee, wishing his enemy would just die already. That magic was called Fire Shotgun, very powerful at close range, but its reach was short, only 7 meters. He could dodge it by running, and the spoiled brat managed to fire several of those shots. With great skill, our protagonist dodged every one of them. He wondered if the brat hated him enough to use a defective chip, but he didn't believe the item was faulty. It made him much more powerful. Hadel said this was expected. The brat didn't even remember what happened. Intrigued by those words, the spoiled one said he would never use a defective item to deal with trash like him. And if he was going to keep talking nonsense, he should just hurry up and die, unleashing more attacks toward Hale. But those wind spears didn't land a hit. Hale said that chip boosts physical strength and alters the range and power of magic. The spoiled brat didn't care about that. Hale continued his explanation. He was studying the structure of circles, mana, and magical formula transformation, and he was very sensitive to those kinds of changes thanks to the training he had been doing. In this fight, he was understanding the chip's function even better. His opponent was still furious, didn't care about his words, and just wanted him dead. Our protagonist said that wasn't a thank you. He was just deciding whether to finish him off now or later. In recent days, our protagonist had been very contemplative while studying Idrid's book. The biggest issue was the penalty, since accelerating while shifting between different types of circles placed an enormous strain on both body and mind. The resulting penalty was in duration. For those who reached the second circle and mastered resonance use, the maximum duration was 3 minutes. After that, the circle wouldn't move for the next 12 hours. That's why he had to think carefully. The brat, hearing this, believed he was scared. The maximum resonance time he could use was just 3 minutes. But to win that fight, it was more than enough. Placing his hands on the ground, he began to use earth magic. Large cracks began forming in the ground, heading straight toward the brat. He tried to react to avoid it, but was suddenly struck in one leg by a spike. He quickly recognized it as the third circle and began wondering how a piece of trash could do all that. Our protagonist was intrigued by his question and started thinking whether he should explain how he managed it. While the brat attacked, Hale said he'd always thought about it. His enemy was just as bad at magic as he was at trash talk. As a fireball came his way, he once again used a water shield to defend himself. But this time, the result was completely different from the start of the duel. The brat hadn't realized yet, and thinking the protagonist still couldn't block his attack, believed he'd burn him to the bone this time. But it didn't take long for him to understand what was going on. His once powerful attack had become completely useless against that defense. Hale said the boy should at least understand a few things before opening his mouth, that the magic he just invoked was completely different from before, and the brat's techniques wouldn't be able to touch him from that point on. Having all his attacks completely frustrated, the brat got angry once again. He began charging toward the protagonist to launch close-range attacks. As he approached, he said he finally understood what was going on. Hale could only have gotten stronger because he's dote. He's definitely using something to have that kind of strength. Closing his eyes in contemplation, our protagonist said that it was already over, and he wouldn't regret what happened because all of it was the result of that jerk's own actions. As soon as he finished speaking, he used dark magic. As he was being completely enveloped by shadows, the jerk started wondering what that could be. Hale said things could have been different if the jerk had hesitated to try and kill him. But that's not what happened. In the middle of the darkness, unable to see anything, the jerk started screaming furiously, saying Hale was a coward for hiding from him. The protagonist still hadn't finished his attack. He was also using earth and wind magic, managing to summon chains that completely immobilized the body of the unhinged young man. His legs were also tightly bound to the ground. It was too late to beg for mercy, yet Hale assured him he'd try to send him to the metaphysical world as quickly as possible. The jerk refused to believe those words, thinking he could still break free, blaming the protagonist for his miserable life. However, Hale said he wasn't the one to blame for that. It's very easy for weak people to blame others for their own actions. Then he asked the jerk why people don't use illegal chips aside from the collateral damage they cause to the body. After extending his hand toward the chip, the jerk's body began to writhe in deep and intense pain. He merely channeled a bit of his mana into the chip's frequency and asked the jerk if that pain wasn't excruciating. The boy's agony was so intense that he could no longer control himself and began to beg the protagonist to stop. A body and an AI pushed beyond their limits can collapse with even the slightest external interference. At last, our protagonist could thank the jerk. Thanks to the insane actions he took, Hail would now receive great benefits from that fool's family. In a way he couldn't even imagine. Who knows, maybe even 40% of the rights to magic stone mining they own. Now it was time to say goodbye. He said that while thanking the jerk for the nice gifts he had received. Once again, he placed his hand over the boy's chip, this time channeling much more mana, causing a complete collapse. The fight between them had finally come to an end, and the spoiled boy was now falling to the ground, completely motionless. Our protagonist crouched down to pick up a phone. After dialing a few numbers, he made a call. He had called the best dad in the galaxy, who immediately asked why his son wanted to talk to him so late in the day. Hadel said he already knew his father had been watching everything, and it was quite strange that no student or police officer had shown up after all that commotion. The best dad in the world tried to deflect, saying the students must have been evacuated, and his son shouldn't assume things just because he has the power to block police actions. Hale said many people can do that, but few would actually watch until the end. If it were his brothers, they would have probably attacked him from behind. But thanks to the non-intervention agreement, they didn't know anything. The best dad in the world agreed with those words. While still on the call, Hale noticed someone approaching. A man in boots was very close to him. Kneeling before the protagonist, he said he had detained Siak Hyen. Some hooded men came to collect the body while Hale was walking away. The best dad in the world asked why, if his son knew he was being watched, he didn't ask for help. He didn't do it because he wanted to showcase the third magic circle. His father didn't believe he had achieved that in such a short time and thought his son was hiding the truth. He said he did achieve it, but that was a lie. In reality, he had just used the resonance effect of the second circle. So he admitted he still lacked power, and if his father knew he could use third circle magic, he wouldn't have managed to get him to prevent his brothers from acting. Besides, Hyen was using magic to block sound and illusion magic to mask the surroundings. The best dad on the planet said that wasn't bad at all, and he was sending a car to pick up the protagonist so he could go home and rest. Their call ended with the note that they'd see each other soon. The old man looked at the phone with a discreet smile on his face, until he began to laugh out loud because he was impressed by the confidence his son had gained. Looking at the bodyguard, Hale said it had been a long time since he last saw Hyen. The man placed his hand over the mask he was wearing. Revealing his true identity, he confirmed that it had indeed been a long time and asked for a moment. Approaching the young master, he said the injuries he had weren't superficial. He would only perform first aid, and the rest would be left to the family's personal doctor. Hale thanked him for the care. As he walked toward the car, he said he would leave the rest of the work to that bodyguard. He had already put his mask back on, saying that the news about this wouldn't spread. Inside one of the family's buildings, someone was feeling very uncomfortable. It was the eldest son, who was very upset. He had no idea why things were happening this way. A man sitting on the couch asked if he was finally done working. He thought he'd be waiting there forever, so the eldest son asked if he was from the Black Tower. The mysterious man warned that the guy was unlucky. He didn't expect someone from the Blue Tower to ruin his plans. That only made Jihan even more irritated, since he had been promised the Black Tower never fails. And now he wanted to know what the man in his house still expected from him. The hooded man apologized, saying he laughed too easily and that he would return the payment since the mission had failed and deal with the consequences. Since the client was very important, he shouldn't worry about any leaks, because the instructor who had been captured wouldn't live to see the next morning. The eldest son said he didn't care about that. He wanted to know what would happen to the spoiled brat who gave the chip to Hale. The hooded man told him not to worry because the spoiled brat was no longer alive. He had suffered brain death. Shocked by the news, Jihan demanded more explanation. The spoiled brat attacked Hale completely on his own, and due to the side effects of the chip, now he was just a grieving body. Jihan didn't care about what happened to the brat. He wanted to know how his brother was doing. The hooded man said he got a little injured but had already left. Jihan didn't like how that was said, and the hooded man insisted he was only telling him what he had seen. Jihan was furious to realize his brother had defeated the spoiled brat, even though the brat was using a powerful chip. The Dark Mage confirmed that was exactly what happened, even if some details were unclear. At first, he didn't know what the spoiled brat's purpose was when he approached Hale, but he knew Hyen was also there and was responsible for sealing off the area completely. Because of that, the Dark Mage wasn't able to observe the entire fight. Jihan wondered if the shadows had helped his brother and asked the Dark Mage if he knew how long Hale had been followed. But the man confirmed he had only seen Hyen after he had separated from Hale and had no more details after that. The eldest son knew that Hyen was the head of the shadow unit of his family, which served his father directly. Intrigued by his presence in that place, he thought he should act much more cautiously. He asked what the Dark Mage would do with the defective chip that Hale now possessed, and the Dark Mage confirmed that he didn't need to worry about that either. That chip had a code to be erased and was likely already destroyed. Since the boy seemed to have many questions, the Dark Mage asked if he still wanted to know anything else. He said no, so he confirmed he would be leaving as he needed to burn some living files. Jumping out the window, he said goodbye to his client, leaving Jihan alone and furious. He needed to avoid Hyen erasing any evidence he might have left behind. He had to hurry before things became irreversible. After that fateful day, a few days had passed. Our protagonist continued to drink from the source of mysterious knowledge. He spent so much time studying that he needed to stretch his body frequently. He heard from the master of the Blue Tower that the instructor, who was also a criminal, died during transfer. That news left him slightly thoughtful. He had already expected it, but didn't imagine it would happen so suddenly. Since nothing else had happened since that day, it seemed Hyen had handled the situation involving the spoiled brat's family very well. While thinking about that, the protagonist's phone started to ring. He learned they had secured 43% of the mining rights, and his father was very thankful for his contribution. The boy never expected to receive a thank you from the best dad in the galaxy, who must be truly grateful. Looking out the window of his room, he felt content that everything had gone well. There was only one thing left for him to do now: prepare for the Academy Olympics, which would take place in 53 days. That's what he would put all his focus and effort into. Looking at his phone, Hale never imagined the best dad in the galaxy would send all that information at once. Seeing the details about the Olympics, he was glad that things were going very well, because that's what he would focus on now. While he was distracted, a magic circle began to appear on his body, a sign that the 12-hour penalty from the resonance had ended. Clenching his fists, he could feel his power returning. Now he needed to focus entirely on achieving the third circle. For that, he would immerse himself in that mysterious teachings book. He was already prepared to go to the page for the second test. Once again, he was pulled into the pages of that book. For a moment, his eyes were blinded. It was a little hard to see in that place. The space was completely white, and the boy even thought it might be another world, until he felt a presence materializing behind him. The woman congratulated him for reaching the second test. Even though she looked identical to the first one, her name was Bida, and she was the one managing that space. Still reflecting on her words, the boy began wondering whether his tests would be similar, since in the first test, he had to completely refine that crystal. Bida said that in the second test, the successor would be evaluated on how well he could manipulate the circle freely. As soon as the test started, he would receive further instructions, and upon passing, he would receive the contents from pages 32 to 81. Faced with the amount of knowledge he would gain, he was truly impressed. He never imagined he would gain access to nearly 50 pages of pure knowledge. Maybe he could even learn how to become a loan shark. That could only mean the third circle was on a completely different level from anything he had tried so far. Beta announced that the test would begin immediately, and she soon disappeared before the boy's eyes. The master's voice began to speak to his disciple. He was going to share the contents of the second challenge. Magic circles would appear one by one before him, and the boy had to activate them all. It didn't take long for him to stretch out one of his hands, following the instructions he'd received, channeling the mana he could control into the circle. Once it was fully harmonized, the circle would activate naturally. Seeing what his mana had caused, the boy was slightly surprised. The activation time for each circle was 3 seconds. If he exceeded that time limit, he would have to start over from 0. Hale thought all he had to do was memorize. Only then did his master confirm that the order of the circles would be changed, and tricks like memorization wouldn't work. It was as if Hale had already been expecting something like that. This wouldn't be easy. But if life were easy, babies wouldn't be born crying, so the boy began to focus, because he was quite determined to go through with this attempt. Time continued to pass normally on the outside. Our protagonist looked at the cover of the mysterious book. He was completely exhausted after that first attempt. After 8 hours with no rest at all he had managed to do was harmonize 10 circles. The good news was that little by little, he was getting the hang of how to execute it, but he still needed to find some tips. So he decided he would keep reading that book, until he finally came across an interesting note. That wasn't the only book written by that author. If he had questions, he should look for his other works. Those words left our protagonist impressed. He was sure that eventually he'd need to find those other books, but he didn't know their names, let alone what they were about. He decided he would head into the city for a walk. Breathing in some fresh air and changing environments is always good for his thoughts. And once again, he ran into the same person, right after leaving his dorm for a stroll. It was only natural that Adela would be buying banana milk. The future couple was sitting on a bench in the plaza chatting amicably. They acknowledged that they had been bumping into each other a lot lately. Hale said the girl looked like she had stayed up all night. Unhappy with that comment, she replied that it was mutual. She said she had been reading a very interesting article, and asked if the boy would like to take a look. The title was The Feasibility of Spatial Transfer Magic. Our protagonist thought that title was a little sensationalist. Even though she agreed with it, Adela was completely impressed and is eager to read it again. Once he opened the book, the boy began reading its introduction. He was deeply focused, while his classmate was drowning herself in banana milk. Due to her peculiar tastes, she carried a bag full of that type of drink. After finishing the reading, he told her the content was very good. Although both agreed the book didn't have a proper conclusion, there was also some information there that caught Hale's attention. The article was based on books left by Ray Bell Bittner, which had been analyzed by the author. That name instantly made the boy anxious. He needed to know more about it. He had already suspected this might be the case, as the structure of the book was a bit different, but much of its content resembled Beitner's basic theory. So he asked his classmate who the author of that book was, and she said his name was Go Sang-jun. As soon as he returned to his room, the boy went to his computer to do some research. He discovered that the author of that article was a magic researcher not affiliated with any organization with unknown gender and age. The only article he had published was that one. Perhaps he disappeared after receiving criticism. Our protagonist began to feel frustrated, imagining this might be the limit a student like him could reach. But he wasn't an ordinary person. He was very well connected. With his phone in hand, he immediately called the master of the Blue Magic Tower. Inside the tower's headquarters, the master reached for his phone. He was extremely tired as he had spent the previous night conducting his research. He heard from Hale that the young man had something that could benefit them all. Knowing the young man always brought good opportunities, Kim immediately became alert, until our protagonist asked if he could help him find a certain person. Life inside the Obelisk Academy continued normally. Our protagonist had headed to the training room. He was using his magic techniques to improve them in combat. His friend Poor Guy was the sparring partner this time, a tough and painful task. Several of our protagonist's attacks were headed toward the boy, but that was far beyond his capabilities, and he said our protagonist was cheating. He replied that wasn't true. It was just a first circle spell and shouldn't be a problem at all. But his friend was outraged by that comment, saying it was still extremely unfair. After attempting a few dodges, he realized they weren't very effective, since his face was soon hit by one of those wind birds. Observing everything that happened, our protagonist got very excited, because his friend managed to protect himself at the last moment. That made him very happy, but his friend said he had almost died just moments ago. Since they had trained magic already, he invited our protagonist to practice unarmed combat. Hale thought it was a great idea, but questioned his friend's ability to beat him in that kind of fight. The young man was already approaching, motivated and ready to land punches on our protagonist's face, but he was caught off guard when his shirt was grabbed quickly. He couldn't even react, and he had already received his one-way ticket straight to the ground. It was so brutal that other students who were also practicing started getting worried. Showing the strength in his hands, our protagonist asked what his friend thought of that, because to him, training that way was also very interesting. In unarmed combat, there was no advantage of variable magic, only the power of second or third circle remained. The protagonist's friend didn't know whether that was an insult or a compliment. He said Hale's skills were insane, and his combat proficiency was truly outstanding. Even so, he considered him a pretty dirty fighter. While applying bandages to his friend's back, he said that if he was complaining, maybe he should try biting his own back. They were already getting ready to leave the training room, and the young man asked our protagonist what his next plans were, since he already knew he was aiming to win the Olympics. Hale was very surprised by that, not knowing how he got access to such information. Proudly, he said his friend couldn't hide anything from him. That's why Hale was so fired up during the Crystal Mana Barrier test. The average student could block 27 attacks, but our protagonist managed to block 74. Aside from exams and training, the boy had been excelling in absolutely everything. If he planned to compete with older students, that was the best option he had available. But in the protagonist's current condition, it will be challenging to win the Olympics. Seeing the expression that took over Hale's face, his friend was certain he had hit the mark. The favorite for this year is a magic user already at the 5th circle. Hale realized that Sun-chan was right about everything. He can use 3rd circle magic with resonance, but to enter the Olympics, he needs to be at the 4th circle. That's why he needs to find Go Sang-jun. Inside the city, he began analyzing the location he had received on his phone. He started to wonder if that was really the right place. Kim apologized for the delay. He didn't think it would take an entire week to find someone. Even so, he managed to find Sang-jun's address. The boy realized it was the old bookstore he often visited. He never imagined that this author was so close within reach. Since he couldn't use eye, he had always depended on books. Maybe he had even found the mysterious book in that same place. Opening the door to the bookstore, our boy announced his arrival. Inside, there was a man arranging some things. He quickly recognized his customer Hale, saying it had been a while since the last time, and asked if everything was all right. He had even heard that the boy could use magic properly now. He also noticed that he looked much healthier. Hale said that was all thanks to him. The old man replied that he hadn't done much, he had just sold some old books, but Hale said it was the books that allowed him to make such progress. The old man was flattered by the compliment and asked what brought the boy there that day. Going straight to the point, he asked if Sang-jun was his son. That only made the old man more intrigued, as he wanted to know how the young man had learned about that person. Our protagonist said he had read his article, and he had many questions to ask. Once he found out he was around, he apologized if he seemed intrusive, but since it was very important to him, he wanted to meet this person. The old man remembered that article, and said he would help the boy meet him. Hale immediately showed his gratitude, bowing before him. But the old man warned him, even if they met, there was no guarantee the young man would get answers. After hearing that, Hale asked what that could mean. Then the old man opened a door and asked him to follow, saying Sang-jun was inside. After walking a little further, they arrive at another door. The old man told our protagonist to go in. That was Sang-jun's room. Knowing he was about to meet this person made our protagonist very anxious. The protagonist's surprise was quickly explained. What he saw before him was a bedridden man, with breathing support and intravenous lines in his arm. It looked like he had been in that condition for a long time. His eyes were sunken, his hair was very long, and there were no signs that he ever woke up. That man before him was the bookseller's son. The two sat there by the bed while our protagonist thought deeply, until he finally gathered the courage to ask what happened to him, and the bookseller said he would answer. His son had broken a major taboo. In the world of magic, that's what had happened to him. Hale immediately asked which one. The old man replied that the boy had tried to circulate mana within his own brain. This triggered many thoughts in our protagonist because that was something he had done as well. It was the first step that allowed him to become a disciple of that mysterious book. But seeing the condition of the man in front of him made him feel deep empathy, and he asked why he would do something like that. The old man's understanding of his son seemed immense. He said it had been necessary. Finally, a decent father figure in the story. In his quest to establish a flawless thesis, he encountered some problems along the way, and his last resort was to try circulating mana in his brain. The old man reflected that he should have stopped him from doing it, no matter the cost, that he wouldn't have a son stuck in that bed. Our protagonist began to think about how far that man must have gone with his techniques, and the bookseller apologized as he could no longer satisfy his customers' questions, but he acknowledged that his son would have been very happy to meet him. Hale was the one who apologized for making him go through that, since he had brought up feelings the old man didn't need to revisit. Placing a hand on his shoulder, he said it was all right because he knew this young man, aside from being diligent, deeply cared about books. My God, a wise and understanding father, forget everything. This is the true hero. He remembers the way our protagonist carefully searched through each of the works, and that reminded him of his own son, which made him very happy. As they talked, the twilight light began to color the sky. Before leaving, he asked if he could have access to the books the old man's son had used for his research. Since they would only rot on the shelf, he agreed it would be better for the books to find someone interested. Honestly, I'm already rooting for this family to get a happy ending. However, he had two requests to make to our protagonist. If one day he wrote articles on that subject, he asked that his son be cited as well. Hale assured him he definitely wouldn't forget him. Now came the second request. He asked that under no circumstances that promising young man before him should circle the weak in his own brain. Our poor protagonist said he wouldn't do that. Having made his requests, he took the boy to where his son's research books were kept. He let him search for the books he needed. It didn't take long for one of them to catch our protagonist's attention, and the book seemed to know it would be used, throwing itself off the shelf, falling on the ground in front of our protagonist. Quickly examining the cover, he noticed it resembled Idrid's book a lot. As soon as he picked it up, Hale had a question for the bookseller, and he immediately recognized that copy since his son used to carry it around frequently. He asked the boy to read it too, as the answer to his curiosity most certainly lay within those pages. As soon as he opened it, he immediately recognized the terrible handwriting. It definitely belonged to his master. He asked the bookseller if he could borrow that book. The old man said he could take it and any other book he found necessary. Hale was deeply grateful for all the kindness shown to him. He took the opportunity to ask if there were other books written in a similar manner, but the old man didn't know. He asked if there were books with covers similar to that one, but the old man didn't remember any. Hale began to wonder how his son had gotten that copy. Then he thanked the bookseller for the help he had received. Now he was curious to find out how Edward's book had ended up in his hands. The boy finally managed to return to his dorm. Even after analyzing the books used by Sangjin in his research, he only found one that resembled the book he already possessed. Even if it was little, that modest result was better than nothing. Once the books were placed near each other, they began to react synergistically. The boy was very surprised by this, trying to understand what was happening as the books started glowing at the same time, until several roses began to emerge from those pages and the master's voice appeared once again, saying he was leaving that book for his successor. And our protagonist realized he was being taken into those pages once more. The name of that copy was Mimiri, and now he should enjoy the blessings of knowledge until his heart is satisfied. And the boy was swept away into that other dimension. His body was transported to a room, and he was lying on the floor. Slowly standing up, he asked where he could be. Someone was approaching from behind our protagonist, and gently touched the back of his neck. He turned around to see who was poking his cheek. It was a young girl, who welcomed him to the Book of Mimiri. Looking at that unknown figure, our protagonist asked who she was. Smiling at the question, she said her name was Mimi. She was also the administrator of this place, called the Will of Mimir. She said she was very grateful to meet the successor. He looked around, trying to understand the place called Will of Mimir, and the girl answered that it was the name of that library. It had been prepared by Beitner himself to be used by the next successors. In fact, the entire library was exclusive to those individuals. Our protagonist thought that space was too small to be called a library, and the girl said his achievements were still small, and the scale of that place changed according to the successor's level. Judging by its current size, she guessed he hadn't passed the second test yet, which our protagonist confirmed. Looking a little uncomfortable, the girl asked if they could talk more casually. That question caught our protagonist a bit off guard, but she said they'd be seeing each other frequently from now on, so it would be better if they treated each other more naturally. Hale agreed with that suggestion, which made the girl very thankful. She said this successor is very talented since he's already at the second circle and found her quickly, but he doesn't understand how that could be considered talent. The girl briefly smiled, saying he could progress smoothly without any issues all the way to the fifth circle. That information left our protagonist stunned, as he had no idea how that could be possible. Then Mimer began levitating in the air, using part of her magic, until she reached a book sitting on a shelf. The book immediately floated into her hands. Handing it to the boy, she asked him to read it. He would understand everything soon enough. Opening the book, he realized it was about the theory of resonance, but in a very detailed way. That place held information that couldn't fit in the Idrid Codex, like the book he was reading now. The boy asked why that information wasn't all in a single book. Mimer said that was an excellent question. The test pages and the successor verification had caused an overload. That's why the original book only held the fundamental information, creating the need for supplementary material. Hale asked if the master had compiled detailed information in that book as well. And that's exactly what had happened. That place they were in was a vast reference library. Hale assumed all the books in that place contained dense information and that the place would expand as he grew as a mage. Mimer confirmed that's exactly what would happen. Now she asked if he knew how to reach the fifth circle. He said yes, with the material he had received from her, he would pass the second test easily. When he opened those pages, it was as if he had been absorbed into another dimension. While taking the test, his progress steadily increased. He had reached a total of 79 circles. On his first attempt, it had taken him 8 hours to synchronize 10 circles. But since he found that book, he managed to boost his efficiency with little effort. Everything he had attempted now was pure hard work, and he was very confident that he'd be able to synchronize 100 circles soon, maybe even that same day or at dawn the next. Finding Mimer's book was definitely a huge blessing, especially right before the Olympics. The boy was inside the main residence of his family. He was being taken by his servant to his father's office. He wondered what had motivated the summons, and considered whether it might be some kind of reward for the incident with the spoiled boy. After all, that event had brought major benefits to his family. He had been planning to continue his private training. Although this meeting was important, he didn't expect it to be right now. Finally, he entered the office. The best dad in the galaxy told him to sit down because he would get straight to the point. Unlike last time, his son's contribution had not been total. It barely accounted for half the outcome, and his share of the mining rights was 26%. He acknowledged that the boy had brought great profit to the family, so he deserved a proper reward. He asked if his son was wishing for something in particular. Hale replied that there was definitely something he wanted. He wanted the ancient relic that was stored in the deepest part of the family vault. The old man asked if he believed in some kind of fantastical narrative about those relics, since they were just antiques. The boy said he didn't see it that way. He didn't care about sales, but believed even myths held some kind of truth. His father raised his hands to his head in concern, seeing that his son believed in those kinds of stories. But since it was his choice, he would respect it, telling the boy he could choose only one item. That made our protagonist quite excited. Now the old man wanted to know which relic he desired. Hale had a very specific item in mind. There was a cloak that was properly stored. It was the cloak of Betainer himself, kept in that vault. The boy and his father went to the family vault where the relics were stored. The old man hoped he wouldn't regret this choice, and our boy was very grateful to receive that item. Seeing that his son believed in ancient stories, he realized the boy was still quite naive. He should dedicate himself more to training instead of trusting in that kind of tale. The limousine hurried through the streets to take the boy back to the academy dorm. Most of the relics his family possessed were completely genuine. Hale was wondering if that really was the cloak that once belonged to his master. Having mining rights meant nothing compared to that item, if it was authentic. All that was left was to confirm whether the item was genuine. As soon as he opened the container, his eyes were overtaken by pure astonishment. Since those fibers are made from the purest mana, mana fibers are the result of an advanced technique that transforms mana stones into a fine, refined fabric. There are fewer than 30 artisans on the planet capable of crafting items with this material, and that entire cloak was made of such fibers. Hale began to wonder how this technology had existed for so many years. It's better than modern items, and he had never seen anything like it. The boy could no longer hide his overwhelming excitement. Inside his room, he continued to carefully examine the relic he had obtained. He found his signature on the cloak, written in dreadful handwriting. Now he was certain that it once belonged to his master. Spreading the cloak with his hands, he began analyzing its structure. The inside and outside were reversed. This was another reason why the material was so difficult to work with, because the interior and exterior had to be constructed in completely different ways. The inner part must conduct mana efficiently, and the outer part should focus on blocking mana and reducing damage, and this cloak was reversed. He was sure his master wouldn't make such a big mistake. He concluded that the cloak was meant to be worn inside out, and he did just that with the relic, imagining it would look better that way. But even after turning it inside out, the structure remained completely unchanged. Hale realized it had been designed to be exactly like that, but he still couldn't understand its purpose. Now he understood why his father had left that relic to rot in the back of the storage room. However, there was one place where he could get all of his questions answered. The boy went straight to the library of Mimir. Upon arriving, he had several questions to ask her. The girl was surprised by the successor's presence. It didn't take long for her to notice the item he had brought with him this time, because she immediately recognized that cloak. Seeing that he had already found such an item, she figured the boy must really be lucky, but the successor had questions that needed answering. While the girl examined the cloak with her own hands, she asked what it was about, until she seemed to have a sudden epiphany. She confirmed that the boy was still in the second magic circle. He was surprised by that observation, but confirmed that it was indeed the case. Then it would be natural that he still didn't know anything. Even so, Hale wanted to know how he was supposed to use it. In light of his questions, she apologized, saying she couldn't explain anything about that item to him. Our protagonist was very surprised, and she handed the cloak back to him. That style of magic had a very special enchantment, and the girl realized she had started talking too much about the subject. Hale asked what she was referring to, but she couldn't even share the name of the enchantment, so she asked him to forget the topic. Ignoring her own advice, she said that this style of magic contained an enchantment called true magic. Paying close attention to what she was saying, Hale couldn't hide his surprise. She said it was different from the magic he usually used, that's why it was called true magic. Hale asked if what he had been doing so far wasn't real magic. Mimer said, unfortunately, that's a valid way of seeing it, but she couldn't give him further explanations until he reached a higher level. Hale realized it must be some kind of restriction, and that was exactly what was happening. That cloak was an artifact meant to support true magic. Hale understood he wouldn't be getting more information about that artifact, and Mimer was relieved that he caught on quickly. He just wanted to know what level he needed to reach to learn more about the cloak. The girl said he needed to reach the 5th circle. A spark of excitement lit up in our protagonist's heart as she told him he needed to master that level, since Bettner's magic style only began at the 5th circle. Once again, our protagonist was trying to pass the second test. This time he had already reached the mark of 98 circles, and he finally managed to complete the challenge that had been set for him. Knowing he had succeeded, he began to savor the taste of his own triumph. The voice of his master congratulated him for what he had done. He acknowledged that it must have been very difficult to get through the second challenge, but now he would teach him how to construct the 3rd circle. The 3rd stage of Beitner's technique, the Circle of Infinity and the Interference technique. With that completed, he closed the book that was in his hands. Having finally overcome the second challenge, our protagonist looked like an emotional child. He didn't even know how to use the cloak yet and was wearing it inside his room. I can't judge him and do the same. It's time for him to start constructing the Circle of Interference. If it weren't for the blessings of the cloak and the knowledge from the second book, he would have taken much longer to complete that challenge. The night before, he had gone to Mimer to get more guidance. He can only use that bench once he reaches the 5th magic circle, and apparently the boy just needs to be patient until that happens. He decided he would wait to use the cloak until he could fully utilize it. But the girl scolded him, saying he shouldn't set aside something so precious, and our protagonist replied that he still didn't know how to use it. Then she took the cloak from the boy's hands. She said the artifact prevents mana from escaping and keeps it compressed inside, causing the user to reach a stage of mana saturation. Upon hearing this information, he began to grow more interested. When mana is saturated, circles can form faster than usual, which increases the mana flow in the brain. That allows him to recover from fatigue more quickly. The same applies to physical fatigue accumulated in the body. He understood that by using the item, he would need much less sleep, but the girl saw that he hadn't fully understood, because when using that cloak, he would never need to sleep again. That was such an astonishing effect that the boy was immediately in disbelief over such a blessing, and she said he only needed to wear it for 5 hours a day to be in peak physical condition. And that was just a small effect of the cloak, it wasn't even its true power. After seeing what the artifact was capable of, Hale grew increasingly eager to reach the 5th magic circle. She reminded him that it only works for the successor. For others, it's poisonous. The boy got the message and was now excited for the upcoming tests, since the cloak would make things much easier. Since then, 2 days had passed, and he continued meditating with that cloak. His progress was accelerating more and more. He felt he was getting closer to interference, but there was still something missing. So he immersed himself in the knowledge written in those books. The power of the 3rd circle allows one to interfere with another person's mana, but he needs to synchronize with it completely. That explanation was too vague, and it was astonishing that someone could interfere with another person's magic, because that honestly sounded very intriguing. At first, he wasn't expecting that and had no idea the second test was just a small step toward approaching interference. To weave the 3rd circle, he needed to resonate and synchronize with the mana around him. If he could pull that off, the 3rd circle would be formed. Filled with new enthusiasm, the boy believed he would finally achieve the result this time. He needed to synchronize the mana in the air as well as the mana already saturated within his body. It felt as if he were building a new house. The mana began to gather as he made it resonate. Little by little, the mana in the air was being absorbed, and our protagonist could hear the voice of the mana saying it was interested in playing with him, and that it was really enjoying this. The sensation was so warm that it had no intention of leaving. All of this felt entirely different, and our protagonist realized he had already passed the halfway mark. He just needed to maintain the resonance. While the mana played, they started joining hands to form a circle. Now he needed to concentrate even more, because if he lost focus, the mana wouldn't fix itself to his body. He needed to reduce the amplification rate very precisely so the circle could be formed, and do it very carefully. without letting the mana notice what was happening. After several hours of meditation, a new day dawned. And even with the cloak's benefits, the boy was completely exhausted. But his effort had paid off since he had completed that objective. He had the first circle of deliberation, the second circle of resonance, and now, clenching his fists tightly, he was ready to reveal what he had accomplished. The third circle of infinity, interference. Our protagonist couldn't hide how happy he was with his latest achievement. He needs to get stronger as quickly as possible so he can reach the fifth magic circle. Inside the forest near his academy, he went to rest in the shade of a tree, while thinking that the next exam would be a battle which would take place in that mountainous region. The test will last 32 hours and each student will have a special artifact. All he needs to do is survive for as long as possible, and the area keeps shrinking as time passes. He just earned a few more points, so it's time to get moving too. The students have to deal with attacks from monsters and other students, while also earning points in the process. The bird that had been resting on the boy's lap flew away as if it sensed something, until another student suddenly appeared, attacking our protagonist, who managed to react quickly and dodge that pointless attack. He landed calmly on the ground, observing the one who attacked him. The extra said he managed to escape this time but was already inside his trap. Our protagonist decided he would test the strength of his own fists, and the extra summoned a magic barrier, claiming he wouldn't be able to break through it with physical force. But our protagonist wanted to try putting some things into practice, because he hadn't punched the barrier but used his new interference skill, causing the shield to begin cracking completely, which left that poor extra in genuine fear. Without the protection that kept him separated from the protagonist, there was no way he could even keep his underwear intact, because our boy was using earth magic to take him down. The boy regretted that it had to happen, while Hale said he shouldn't be proud that people were targeting someone like him. Besides, he shouldn't announce his attacks every time he executes them. Either way, the interference power is really interesting. He weakened a second circle spell with great ease, being able to completely destroy it with a first circle spell. Because of that brief encounter, the extra was eliminated from the exam. Since he was too careless, an outcome like that was predictable. By defeating him, our protagonist earned 10 more points, which made him quite happy with the start of the test. As he walks through the forest, he realized he's getting the hang of using interference, and soon it will work against third circle spells too. Still deep in thought, he sensed some movement behind him, which was enough to put him on high alert. This time, our protagonist wouldn't wait for the attack, sending a large fireball toward the distraction. And what he saw left him quite impressed, because he had been surrounded by dangerous wolves. It seems the creatures approached him after hearing the sound of his last battle. If he were an ordinary student, he'd be complaining about the back-to-back fights. But since he wants to master it overwhelmingly, he's grateful for the excellent opportunity. One of the wolves sensed this would be tough and began to howl. It was the order for the other creatures to attack as well, and our protagonist is eager to take them all down. The boy is being closely watched by the supervisors. Some names from that academy are already standing out to the teachers. Our protagonist, Adela, and some other clowns whose names I won't bother to learn are truly impressive. If things keep going this way, they'll soon be among the top 10, and one of the teachers said that's a very hard task. But the one with glasses agrees, and no one's left to disagree with the following: that Shin Haeol, commonly known as our protagonist, is an extremely talented person, and she wants to know if Instructor Changsu has any doubts about that. Watching closely what the boy is doing in the forest, he agrees with that statement. Other teachers are also excited about his performance, as he's been ranked first in all training sessions. Moreover, he's far ahead of everyone else taking that test. The boy who knows the wolves' behavior and didn't kill any of them until the entire pack had gathered in order to rack up the most points. Given his performance, the teachers started to dream maybe he could win at the Olympics. And after successive battles, our protagonist was already very tired. With the last one, he managed to gain 60 more points, until he felt the ground beneath his feet begin to shake. He thought it was an earthquake, but soon realized the ground itself was moving. He finally understood what had happened in that place. From the ground emerged an enormous body as big as an elephant, and the creature had emeralds on its back. It was an emerald turtle. Who would have thought such a rare monster would appear in this place? After dodging the creature, our protagonist faced it head-on. It was the first time he had ever encountered that kind of monster in person, and it was time to face it with everything he had learned so far. Inside the main building of the academy, the teachers kept watching closely. They were already aware that the most promising student of the year had just encountered the emerald turtle. One of the purposes of the evaluation is for the students to learn how to escape danger and to learn how to collaborate with each other. The turtle is a rare monster. No matter how genius he is, they believe that our protagonist is not capable of handling it alone. The turtle has high defenses, being one of the natural enemies of mages in this world, and it is determined to make our protagonist its afternoon snack, sending a crushing and destructive blow toward him. But our boy manages to easily dodge that. He is sure that if he can defeat it, he will get a great score. His thoughts were soon interrupted as the turtle showed great agility as well. Since he was midair, he would need to build a defense barrier to protect himself, and he used that shield as a platform, which prevented him from being hit by the turtle's tail. The teachers are pleased that he managed to use the shield as a platform, but that wouldn't be enough to protect him from the turtle. It didn't take long before our protagonist sent his powerful flames toward it, While the fire burned, he couldn't contemplate the result of his actions. He waited, hoping it would work against it, only to realize that all he did was make the turtle even angrier. An unexpected result even for him, and he began to feel a bit scared. Running from the creature, he realized it would be quite a formidable challenge. Not even a fifth circle user could defeat it alone. And because it stores mana in its body, it's a very fast turtle. It was at that moment that his brilliant mind noticed something incredible. The creature has a human in its body. So there are some things he could try at that moment. The first thing he did was strengthen the power in his legs, giving him the momentum to dodge the attacks with great agility. Forcing the creature to change direction as well, he realized that this turtle could destroy things effortlessly. If any of those attacks hit him, it would be the end of his test. But he couldn't keep running forever. If he wanted to win, fighting would be necessary. Once again, he built his barrier to block that attack, feeling once again that the strength of that monster is truly impressive. He wouldn't be able to block that attack for long, so he started using resonance. It had become a battle of strength, and he still couldn't move until he regained strength in his legs. It was the opportunity the boy wanted to take to deliver another attack, this time using wind magic. He managed to get even closer to the poor creature. He had already read about it in some books when he was a child. The attacks it executes overload its joints, causing it to lose part of its mobility. This is the window of opportunity he needs to exploit immediately. Knowing he must act, he began preparing an ice spear to attack the turtle. At the boy's audacity, the teachers who were watching were very impressed, since that cocky prodigy had decided he wouldn't run away. While he struck the turtle, he used the interference he had learned, causing the turtle to spit blood. The attack proved to be quite dangerous for it, and with a single accurate blow, the turtle was sent to the wild animal paradise. Not even our protagonist could believe he had achieved victory, receiving 1,000 points for this. A truly impressive result for someone like him. The test continues in that region. Inside the main house of our protagonist's family, another person is watching it all. On Haeun's side, the patriarch of the family witnessed all of this, and he can't hide the pride he feels for his youngest son. Even though the turtle is weak against ice attributes, he doesn't know how his son managed to do that with only 3 magic circles. Not even Haeun has an answer for that. They watch as the boy collects some of the creature's meat as he needs to survive a few more days in that place. But the best father of the year said that he didn't raise his son to be this weak, and they watch as he leaves with a large portion of turtle meat. Haeun has a question for the head of the family, who is curious about it. He wants to know how this young man can be so brave, as he has already noticed that Jihan and Violetta are people of toxic actions. The old man said those are premeditated actions. When magic was still restricted, Haeul was excluded from the succession race, which is why his status in the family is miserable. But things have changed completely. He doesn't even know exactly how, but his son has developed great power, and his progress is not only notable, it's undeniable. And he asked for protection during the months leading up to the Olympics, so that he could progress smoothly and maybe even do something extraordinary. Hearing all of this, Haeun couldn't hide her surprise. The boy wants to achieve worldwide recognition to increase his influence within the family. And after those 2 months of protection, he's certain that interference from his older brothers won't be a problem anymore. Truly, he has become a courageous man. Night finally fell over the forest, but our protagonist has a hearty turtle meal to prepare. One of the rules of that test is that confrontations are not allowed between 11 p.m. and 1 a.m. He knows that's for the students' safety, but it's an obstacle to developing their skills. Some academies have even stricter rules. This one needs to change immediately. At least he can bring some magical artifacts, and our protagonist can recover his fatigue while using the cloak. Now he can enjoy his meal peacefully. Once he finished, he felt quite satisfied. After that, he began to hear movement in the bushes behind him. He realized it was his friend Suncheon and his rival Adela. They sat around the protagonist's campfire and he started asking why they were working together. They said they had actually been fighting, but their time ran out. Suncheon even noted that actually he was being beaten up. After they finished fighting, our protagonist assumed they just followed the smell of the barbecue he was making. His friend said the smell was really delicious and they would like a piece. Our protagonist made a point of saying that it was his, but those 2 companions begged him to be generous. There wasn't much to be done in that situation. Since there was more than enough food, it was better to share with them than waste the leftovers. While enjoying the turtle meat, they were very thankful for the gesture, and both of them were eating like it was the last meal of their lives. Our protagonist felt amazing receiving so many compliments for something he had cooked over an improvised fire. Adela asked if that meat was from a bear, a creature that lives in that forest and whose meat is really tasty. Our protagonist said no, and the girl knew that only 2 monsters in that place are edible. The second is the emerald turtle. The meat of the other creatures is poisonous or tasteless, so it's not suitable for consumption. Adela was very startled to realize he might have defeated an emerald turtle. But that's exactly what our protagonist had done. He said he faced the creature west of that position. His friend was also impressed since he had only ever seen that creature online, and he wanted to know how he managed to defeat it. But he completely ignored the explanation, being fully immersed in eating. Adela was also deeply impressed by this claim. She had never heard of a mage below 5 stars defeating that creature. After she said that, our protagonist began summoning some flames, creating a large fire tornado at the location where they were. Adela realized he was already at the 3rd magic circle, and the flames soon vanished before their eyes. But the girl was even more surprised. Transformation magic is something from the sixth circle that should be impossible. Yet our protagonist remained quite confident. Now he was a bit embarrassed by the admiration he had earned from those two. They said they would keep secret whatever he was about to tell them. They wanted to know how he defeated the turtle. Havel said he pierced through its shell, but that made no sense to them. Since they were being filmed by the academy, the boy could confirm that once he left the forest. Even our protagonist was interested in watching his own battle. He said he would watch it first, which made his friends a little thoughtful. But Havel confirmed that they would fight fair at the next dawn. His friend said they wouldn't be able to beat him, and the girl wished him good luck, because she also has something she's eager to show him. The second day of the test advances, and the exam area is shrinking more and more. The professors know that only 4 students remain, and they want to know who will emerge victorious among them. A magical attack quickly approaches our protagonist. He looks back in the direction it's coming from, managing to defend himself skillfully using his wind magic. He looks upward. It's possible to tell where the attack came from. The approaching person says they already passed the supernova phase. A red-haired extra is above our protagonist, and he wastes no time launching a furious attack from above, showing that his movements are truly very fast. Even with all these abilities, he was unable to land any of his attacks. Hale needed to gain distance as he felt a bit pressured by those sudden attacks, which were very coordinated. The red-haired extra finally shows his face, saying that our protagonist was very unlucky to meet him. That is Manhwa, a mage who uses close combat, and our protagonist said he was mistaken as he ended up having great luck. That man gained authority of the academy through his strength, beating his opponents senseless. His body fortification magic is truly impressive. Among those in his class, he is one of the strongest physically, being a specialist in body fortification. He is not someone who could be casually faced, but unfortunately, he ran into the impenetrable barrier that is our protagonist. The battle had turned into a contest of masculinity. Our protagonist decided he would do the same as him, fortifying his body as well for close combat. This got Reca extra quite excited, as this was his area of expertise. The teachers observed the confrontation between the two closely. One of them assumed that this type of combat would favor the extra's natural abilities, since he stands out among the students in this type of combat, in addition to being very experienced. But they can't ignore what happened with the turtle the day before. The protagonist is also impressive, and he manages to dodge the attacks with great ease, using the demon's eyes to see what is happening, a sort of sharing in from the AliExpress. He finally managed to identify the mana flow of his opponent, realizing that it was in his fists, but it had soon been transferred to his knee, which meant he would execute a strike with his leg. As expected, all of that guy's strikes are extremely powerful. Our protagonist decided that he would use his barrier to push him back. Even the extra was surprised that the barrier had been completely destroyed. He had never seen magic used in this way and began to wonder if the genius had truly returned. But that was unlikely. It could just be rumors. The more they fought, the greater his interest in the protagonist, and he was determined to defend his pride, believing he would never lose in a close combat fight. While our protagonist saw a great opportunity to be used, his fist was completely coated in mana, landing a heavy blow on his opponent, who managed to block it using his own arms. This was not the result Hale was hoping for. Even the teachers were impressed by the block executed by that extra, who immediately retaliated with a high kick aimed at the protagonist's head, which he had to actively dodge to avoid being knocked out. His battle sense is truly impressive, but his reflexes are still hindered. If he had used a fire spell suddenly, it would have decided the battle because of the damage his opponent would have taken. With his arms burned, he would have been completely unable to fight at a high level. Our protagonist realized that the strategic advantage was his, surprising his enemy with a quick movement, being ready to strike him once more. About to receive the blow, the poor student took his defensive pose. There was something that our cunning protagonist had already been waiting for. But he wasn't going to deliver a frontal attack. He executed a lateral kick that surprised the defense. Only then did the extra realize he had fallen for a feint. He hadn't even noticed when our protagonist had strengthened his legs. The pain he is feeling in his abdomen is very real. It feels as though his ribs have been broken. But he's a fighter, and that level of pain is not enough to make him give up or compromise his willpower. He continues attacking because that's what his heart is made of. This supporting character is truly amazing. Let's hope he stays in the story. Our protagonist warned him that if he kept relying on his strength, his body would soon break. But like a true fighter, he completely ignored this advice as he advanced furiously. His strikes are unstoppable, but his agility is not enough to reach the protagonist, who once again has a window of opportunity to strike him. It only took for the fighter to touch the ground with his feet to be surprised by a blow, brutally hitting his chin with the right hook. His whole body was thrown away with the impact of that attack. Our protagonist shakes his hand, trying to relieve some of the pain he felt while observing his defeated opponent. For a short period, he managed to concentrate his mana on his chin to minimize the damage suffered. Even so, he is semi-knocked out on the ground. Even our protagonist was impressed by that man's combat skills. Both his attack and defense abilities were very refined. He was not an easy opponent. The day passed without major interference, and night finally fell upon them. Now only 3 survivors remain in the test. In fact, only 2 are left, our protagonist and his sweet rival. Inside one of the buildings of our protagonist's family, some envious people are gathered. They are his siblings who are already rooting against his development. They can't accept that all of this is being broadcast nationally. Violetta is very upset since they can't sabotage him during this period, and now the young man is starting to get out of control. If things keep going like this, he'll soon become a candidate for succession, and that is completely unforgivable. Jihan can't say a single word at the moment, which makes Violetta even more upset because she knows her brother managed to defeat an emerald turtle. That should be impossible for someone in his condition. Besides, the video is already online and the patriarch has probably seen it, just like the rest of the family. Violetta becomes more and more unhinged and her brother asked her to calm down. But that request was like pouring gasoline on a fire. She completely lost control. Gradually, she began to sink deeper into despair, and Jihan's patience reached its limit. He said he wouldn't repeat himself. Now Violetta was frightened. She apologized for overreacting and begged not to be punished. Jihan thoughtfully considered that possibility. He began to stroke the woman's head in a clearly insincere manner since we know he's not a trustworthy person. Even so, he said he had no reason to punish her since they are siblings. Still very shaken, she thanked her brother while Jihan was thinking that our protagonist is quite cunning, taking advantage of every good opportunity. And if he continues progressing like this, there will be no way to avoid his lovely intervention. Inside the forest where the test is taking place, the circus is on fire. Adela uses all her skills, saying that this time she won't be caught off guard by her opponent. She's watched the protagonist's fights many times. This time he won't use the sun as an advantage to blind her, since they are illuminated by the moonlight, so she believes she won't give him a chance to counterattack, executing another powerful attack in his direction. And indeed, Hail has to be fully engaged in dodging all those strikes. He was hit by a barrage of lunar bullets, and one of them grazed his arm. This is completely different from their first fight. The attacks are far more numerous. Dodging all of that will be impossible. Adela warned that the boy's techniques are weak against long-range attacks, and she is very focused, determined to come out victorious. That's his weakness, she said, claiming she would overcome his skills and efforts, causing a massive explosion with her attacks toward where our protagonist was. Hale managed to prevent the worst from happening, what he's already feeling distressed and exhausted from dodging. It was necessary to summon a magical barrier to protect himself. Realizing he was being overwhelmed by brute force, he's eager to understand better what she had figured out. And the girl is very confident that this is the right strategy to achieve victory. That volume of attacks isn't something just anyone can do, but it's expected from someone from her family. Finally, our protagonist noticed something very interesting about Adela. That girl had reached the fourth circle of magic. Hiding one of his hands behind his back, Hale was materializing an ice needle. Adela sees her attack, saying that the boy noticed it quickly. Hale listened to her but was also acting shrewdly, hiding an attack within the dust. It's been 4 days since she reached the fourth circle, and that's not all that happened. She took a deep breath as if she were focusing. In the sky above, a blinding glow began to emerge. Hale's attack was heading toward her with precision, but Adela was already fully aware of it, stating she wouldn't fall for such obvious tricks. With a simple wave of her hands, she completely nullified that surprise attack. After opening her eyes, she revealed they had changed. Each one bore a cross-shaped marking. Hale knows that's the heart-eye technique. Combined with the fourth circle, it could be very problematic. This is the secret technique of the girl's family, something the master of the Blue Tower also managed to master, though this is a different technique. A mystical eye focused on detection, Adela is combining power and range with versatility, making her extremely formidable. Even our protagonist recognized that she is a monster in human form. Adela stated once again that she would fight with all the weapons she possesses, for she is not foolish enough to hold back against an opponent of Hale's caliber. While attacking him, she asked when he would reveal the technique that was able to subjugate the emerald turtle. Our protagonist watches patiently as her attacks draw near, saying that the time to reveal what he had done to her was approaching. The color of his eyes had also changed. Hale had completely mastered the mystical eyes. He can perfectly understand the attributes of that attack and the fundamentals of that spell. Using interference, he managed to completely repel the projectiles that would have hit him, leaving Adela shocked as her attacks changed trajectory as soon as she caused it, not understanding what he had done. Hale did not give her the answer, but he wanted to know what she saw from her own perspective, since she also has eyes capable of seeing hidden details. Inside the main house of the protagonist's family, a commotion is taking place, and the best father in the galaxy is impressed by the reaction of this man, as he also wants to know what kind of magic was able to alter the trajectory of his spell. That seemed impossible. He is Wei Sangqiel, Adela's progenitor and apparently the future father-in-law of our protagonist. The best father in the galaxy said that he also didn't understand anything, and the future father-in-law of his son asked if he hadn't shared anything about that technique. But the old man insists that he hadn't heard anything about it. Sangqiel found it odd that the boy was hiding things, and the old man said that in the last year, his son had become quite brave, saying that now he has secrets from the most numerous corpses and has been sharing less and less. Sangqiel recognized that the boy had changed a lot during the year he spent away from home. The old man confirmed this, and they concluded that man needs to leave home to grow. He said that during the previous evaluation at the academy, he believed that the boy had gotten lucky. He feels a bit bad for saying this in front of the protagonist's father, but he thought that Hale would have a flash of talent and would soon succumb to his own mediocrity. The truth is, the protagonist's father also believed this, as his son is incompatible with AI assistants. Sang-Hil said that when he defeated his daughter, it wasn't due to skill, but because of his strategy in that fight. Soon he too will be read by his birthdays. When his limitations become public, he will fall. And at this moment, it is Adela who has the opportunity to execute this. Sang-Hil says she is very promising. But there is a catch in everything they are talking about. The man recognized that he had underestimated the protagonist's abilities, who is now putting pressure on his daughter. He said he has something to confess to Hale's father, revealing that he will be eternally grateful to his son. When his daughter lost sight of her life's purpose for the first time, there was nothing left reflecting in her eyes. But now they shine like they never have before in her life. That's why he is happy that Hale has returned to the game, as it made his daughter rediscover her own motivation. While having this conversation, they continue watching the fight. The best father of the year agreed with these words, recognizing that this is something they should be grateful for. Finally, the last battle had reached its conclusion, and the event organizers asked the survivors to end the fight. Our protagonist is amidst the dust trying to find the girl. His eyes show that he is very surprised, as both of them remain standing. Adela stares at him firmly, even though she is exhausted. Hale began to lament what had happened. If he had a bit more time, he would have won. Adela mocked this statement, as she was in a much more favorable position. The two stare at each other once again in an intimidating manner, until one of the teachers arrived in the forest, saying that they both need to stop now, because it is time to return to the academy. The next day, they are back to their normal routine. Adela firmly believes she had the advantage during the fight. However, Hale refuses to agree with her, as he didn't see things that way. The girl said she could see the trajectory of his strategy. She needed 5 minutes to defeat him. Hale said that in that same time, she would completely exhaust her mental strength, which would make her lose. Sanchin watches the two argue without saying a word. He said that if they were going to keep arguing, they should do it in another room, because in his, he'd like to have a bit of peace. The two got furious at that comment, telling him to shut up. Saddened, he said he just wanted to watch the test recordings with them and didn't want them to fight. He even prepared some drinks and snacks. He even bought banana milk. Even so, his friends kept fighting. After he mentioned the food, his friends started to behave better. Hale even said it's impossible to see the TV if you keep sitting in front of it. Now they could watch everything from the beginning, but they were surprised to find out the recording was 14 hours long. And that's exactly what they did that day. When it was all over, Sanchin was completely exhausted, sleeping on the floor. He was already lost in the deepest dimensions of the realm of Morpheus. Adela started laughing, which made our protagonist very curious. While covering the sleeping friend with a sheet, he said that had been a lot of fun. Watching 14 hours of fight analysis is exhausting. She thought our protagonist would quit halfway. Hale admitted he had the same impression of her, that she would be the one to give up on it. But they managed to make it to the end. Only Sunchin didn't. Adela said he had a great friend there. Hale agreed with that, acknowledging that Sunchin is an excellent friend. Then, without any apparent reason, Adela apologized to him. Hale was puzzled and asked why she had done that so suddenly. For an entire year, she acted like she didn't know him and kept her distance on purpose. And now she realizes that was the wrong choice. She could have done something better. Hale said she didn't need to regret it, since he was the one who rejected the signal she had given. He was the one who wanted to keep his distance, and she shouldn't worry about it. He also tried to keep his distance from the sleeping maiden lying there. Immediately, Sunchin was released from his deep sleep and asked if that was really true. Hale said he already knew he'd been awake for a few minutes, stating that he's no longer the same person he was a year ago because he's gained a new power. Those words made his friends very thoughtful. Hale continued his speech, saying he also has reliable allies and has something to show them. With his hands, he began weaving a sphere of mana. His two friends were soon impressed, saying that should be impossible. But he had managed to materialize Adela's family's secret technique, the lunar bullet. Hale confirmed that what their eyes saw wasn't a mistake, and that it was a spell he had created. Sunchin asked if his alteration magic could target the formula of the spell. And that is exactly what he's capable of doing, in addition to having mystical eyes that allow him to see those formulas. Adela now understood how he was able to grasp her secret technique. That kind of thing isn't taught to people outside the family. What she showed was created based on what he analyzed from her fights. For that, he had to rewatch it several times to perfect the technique. Now she understood how a boy managed to defeat the Emerald Turtle. Hale confirmed that he used alteration magic, weakening the durability of the monster's shell, which is basically made of magic. Sunchin is deeply delighted to know his friend is a monster, and Hale asked if he still needed to explain how he was able to alter the bullet's trajectory. The condition for interference is to deeply understand the target technique, so he didn't use it at the beginning because he wasn't able to. And that's exactly what happened. Hale is impressed that she realized that so quickly. In their last fight, she focused only on the lunar bullets, and our protagonist managed to analyze the technique very well. Now Adela understands that not varying techniques during the battle was her fatal mistake. She asked him if that technique has any weaknesses. Hale revealed that analyzing mana is a bit demanding. He can only interfere with spells that are very close to him, and in a real battle, time is short. He can only slightly alter the trajectory. Adela asked if he's capable of completely changing the direction of a spell, so that returns to its caster. He said that's still impossible because there isn't enough time. She acknowledged that it's a shame. If reflection were possible, the result would be incredible. Even so, their techniques are really impressive. Sunshin started raising his hands desperately, asking for a bit of attention, ordering his friend to sit down and listen carefully. He wants to know why he was revealing such a powerful secret to them. Both Hale and Adela are impressed that he still doesn't understand what's going on. They're already thinking about the Academy Olympics. Only then did Sunshin realize what these two crazy people are planning to do. Our protagonist needs a team, and he intends to take both of them with him. For a brief moment, his friend couldn't hide that he was touched by the invitation. But he has a caveat to make, and Hale wants to hear it. He agrees with Adela's choice, but believes he isn't skilled enough to participate. Even though they are just students, there are greater talents at that academy, but our protagonist said there's no problem at all. And no matter what happens, he will make sure his friend participates too, which left Sunshin very worried. Even though there were many restrictions on the protagonist's technique, Adela understood that this is their greatest asset. If they managed to use it, they could protect their magical stone while attacking the enemy. It would be very useful in a siege battle. And indeed, in this type of combat, he will stand out, as his technique was made for this. Witnessing Hale's confidence, she asked if he had other hidden trump cards. Our protagonist revealed a subtle smile. Of course, he has other tricks. At night, inside his dormitory, he finished another study session, and it was time to enter the book dimension once again, heading directly to that library full of knowledge. Mimir saw that the successor had arrived, and they greeted each other quickly. She said he took a while this time, asking if he hadn't gotten first place, but he said he would get it anyway, and the points from the Emerald Turtle were decisive. He asked if the girl remembered that he needed to win the gold medal in a certain competition, and Mimir remembered him mentioning the Olympics. And that's exactly what it's about. He had already told his friends about the event and about the interference as well. Mimir said that the boy himself had said he wouldn't talk about it until he had completely perfected the technique, but he gave away the secret too quickly. But for Hale, he believes he did it at the right time, which left Mimir impressed as he had completely mastered the interference technique, saying that the successor is truly an incredible person, which made the protagonist the next topic. He needs some books about the Kingdom of Destruction. It's time to look into perfecting the third magical circle. After his training session, he received a call from the master of the Blue Tower. He immediately answered that important call. Kim said he watched the test video and was very impressed that he defeated an Emerald Turtle. Our boy responded modestly, saying it was luck. However, the leader of the Blue Tower is also impressed by how he fought on equal footing with Adela, as she is in the fourth circle. In addition to wanting to know how he was able to pierce that tough face, he asked how he changed the trajectory of the girl's attacks. The first possibility he considered was distortion magic, but he knows it wasn't that. Hale had to apologize to him, saying that he couldn't share details of his magic yet. Kim said he was very excited and apologized, saying the boy didn't need to answer, because a mage has the right to keep their secrets. However, he said that the boy's techniques are very fascinating and one day he will understand how they work. Furthermore, he had one last message for him. He called to talk about the elemental crystal, which they had discussed on another occasion. Our boy wanted to know if the news was good or bad. Kim said the news could only be one. Of course, he brings good news. Everything was already completely prepared. Our protagonist became worried with those words, wondering if he was causing them too much trouble, saying they didn't need to rush. Kim assured him that everything is fine, all the artisans there are excellent, and they are even more eager to work with that raw material. Our protagonist hoped that they were all in this state of mind. Kim said that he didn't need to worry about the artifact, which made the boy very grateful. He was about to end the call, but Hale still had something to say. I have another request to make to them. Kim thought the request was related to what happened with the infiltrated instructor, but this will depend on how the master of the tower interpreted the event. Kim is becoming more and more interested in the proposal the young man might offer. He said it concerns the Olympics of that year. He would like the artisans from the Magic Tower and the engineers of the national team. After talking with the boy, Mimir was shocked, knowing that he will face Fifth Circle users. But that was the condition imposed by the master of the Blue Tower, and the boy is wondering if he really made the right decision. Kim asked if he truly wants to use artisans in his tower the same way engineers are used. The first response he gave was a negative one. Hale understood that his request wasn't very reasonable, but Kim continued that would be his initial answer. However, if the boy managed to defeat a Fifth Circle user, the answer might change. That left our boy quite surprised. In that Olympics, he's going to face users who are already at the Fifth Circle, and Kim has no doubt of the boy's potential. Allocating his artisans for this competition will cost a lot of money. It's hard to commit to that just for honor's sake. So the boy should provide solid proof that he can win the gold medal. Mimir wants to know what the successor's plans are because no matter how she imagines it, he won't be able to defeat a Fifth Circle user in his current condition. Hale still has a 10-day period to prepare. Mimer wants to know if he really plans to establish countermeasures in such a short time. He might have a chance, if he can pull that off, but perfecting the technique in 10 days won't be easy. She wants to know if it's really worth doing all this to gain the Blue Tower's support. Hale said yes. They are the only ones in the country who can customize artifacts and have them approved for the Olympics. That's why he needs the Blue Tower. Mimir understood that they are highly skilled. Havel said the Blue Tower's artifacts have a 10% performance difference compared to other artisans, and they are also the only ones capable of adjusting the elemental crystal. She understood that the performance difference in the artifacts is crucial in determining victory, so they truly need that support. Hale emphasized again that they need the Blue Tower's artisans. Mimir wants to know when they're going to turn to the third challenge page. They need to hurry. But the boy wants to read all the books she had prepared for him before starting the test, which made the girl quite excited about his motivation. She said that when he reaches the third challenge, you should send her thanks, saying that he's doing really well. Hale wants to know if she knows someone there, but the girl said it's a secret, because if he knew now, it wouldn't be any fun. In one of the protagonist's family buildings, a meeting is being held. Those inside are very cheerful, because they're drinking free wine of the finest quality. Several bootlickers are saying that Jihan will be the next family head, and he said he's lucky because of it, since everything he had achieved up to that point was thanks to the help of his flatterers. And they keep saying that the future will be bright under the leadership of this envious man, until one of them said the youngest son is earning his place in the sun. That made Jihan completely furious. And the clueless man kept talking about the youngest son's achievements, who was able to defeat an emerald turtle on his own. That was definitive proof that he remains an exceptional genius. Not to mention that he also fought a fourth circle magic user, being able to withstand the secret attacks her family uses, which are based on the moon element. Resisting her is already a formidable feat. It's even hard to believe he's someone who doesn't use eye assistance. After that, the buzz took over. They started talking about the protagonist's accomplishments. They're already eager to witness his performance in the Olympics. Even the patriarch is interested in the boy's performance. That only makes Jihan's envy grow even more. At this rate, he might lose his favoritism in the association. And being there started to make him very uncomfortable. He began to remember when our protagonist was still a young boy. Everyone used to talk only about him. He thought his brother had been shaken, but now he's on his way back to the top. The extras in that hall noticed Jihan's absence. All he left behind was his shattered wine glass on the floor. He had to leave in a hurry, while thinking that the situation was definitely not good. The hatred he was feeling toward our protagonist was at stratospheric levels, reaching the outrageous conclusion that his brother must die. My God, what a degenerate family. It's all the fault of that father who didn't give love to his children. Completely unaware of his brother's conspiracy, our protagonist continues with his training. He studies with great dedication, and had already gone through several books in that room. He was finally feeling prepared. Mimir asked if he had finished reading everything, and he said yes, those were all the available books, so he was done. She said that he had read everything about destruction and asked if the successor had increased his knowledge. Hale replied that no, and that he hadn't understood anything at all. Mimir wanted to know if he at least reached a superficial conclusion, but the boy couldn't grasp the structure of the concept. She said it's natural that he hasn't fully understood yet. It's like teaching someone to flap their wings. In any case, the requirements hadn't been met. He still couldn't understand destruction. Hale said that her drawing was very bad, but he understood the concept of the explanation. That left the girl slightly affected as she believed her drawing was very didactic. And to understand the conditions, he needs to access the third challenge. Mimir affirmed that the answers would be on that page. Still very curious, he wants to know if the person he should address the girl's thanks to will be the one responsible for teaching him. And she said that if he's that curious, he should see her soon as he had finished reading the books. But that's strange, and he wants to know if there's anything stopping her from sharing more details about the third challenge. She said that it's not a restriction, but a promise they had between them. After concluding his interaction with her, he returned outside. Now our protagonist is interested in the nature of this promise that prevents her from talking about the third challenge. So he took the main book in his hands. Opening the code, he was ready to try that challenge, and placed his hand over the test page. Being sent to another dimension, he was greeted by several branches. This was different from his other experiences, which left our boy a bit surprised. He closed his eyes briefly because of the excess light, until he could better observe the place he was in. Where he was now was definitely a vast forest. And not just any forest, all the trees in that place were excessively tall. He thought he would be in a weird dimension like last time, but he didn't find any guide and he didn't hear his master's voice. He decided he would start walking within that forest, and began wondering if it was truly on the page of the third challenge. Climbing on an elevated rock, he realized the place was indeed very vast. It's almost ridiculously impressive. The magic his master mastered surpasses the limits of imagination. No matter how far he walks in that place, it's as if there is no end. Going to a water source, he was still wondering what kind of test this was, until a strong source of light began to reveal itself, coming from the treetops, while the ground trembled. His first thought was that it was an earthquake, but he soon realized he was wrong. There was something watching him. Immediately, he felt that he might be in danger. A creature even larger than the emerald turtle was staring at the protagonist. That didn't make any sense at all. The boy was scared of the creature he was seeing. Even though he was very close to it, he felt the monster hadn't noticed him yet. Still, the creature roared at him, causing the boy to be thrown into the lake. Slowly, he managed to identify what that was. Its eyes were slit like a reptile, and his body was covered in hard scales like those of a crocodile. With claws and sharp fangs like dangerous blades, he had no doubt left. That dangerous creature isn't even ranked, it's definitely a terrestrial dragon. He imagined it was just a myth and began to wonder if the test was to defeat that creature. But the more he observed, the more he realized that this was an impossible feat in his current condition. The boy was paralyzed by fear. Only the creature's breath was enough to make the mana in the air tremble. It was on a completely different level. Hale already had doubts about whether he could escape the creature's attack. His hands were hesitant, covered in the most primal and visceral fear. And the creature now had its eyes focused on him. Hale wasn't fast enough to run, and the most immediate problem he had now was that his body refused to move. If the creature decided to attack him, there was absolutely nothing he could do, until he began to become intrigued by something else. The terrestrial dragon hadn't attacked yet, not even gotten closer to him. Hale began to wonder if something was preventing that from happening, until a voice said that this was truly impressive. Our boy looked desperately at the source of the sound. Seeing the feet of that woman walking over the water, she was amazed that even in front of a creature he couldn't defeat, he hadn't lost hope. Even in the face of overwhelming danger, he remained calm and composed. Poor thing, she has no idea what happened between the protagonist and his underwear. She said he had passed and that he should be able to move now. Still frightened, Hale asked who this woman was. Her name is Helena Greenwood, once known as the guardian of the forest and a great mage, as well as an old friend of the boy's master. But the surprises in that dimension don't stop, because he realized that woman isn't human, she's a dryad. She asked if she should go in another direction, but the boy was still too scared to speak normally. She began speaking to the creature, which, even driven by desire, did not step into her domain, and she respected that. Acknowledging the creature's patience, she said she would forgive it, even though it had ruined her garden, and now she had an order for it, to return to the forest to which it belongs, calling the creature a fallen noble. She immediately blew something she held in her hands, sending a green energy flying through the forest. Hale watched it all closely, noticing that the entire forest was responding to her commands. That woman was truly powerful. She was the one in charge of that entire place. And if the creature didn't understand her words, it would be sent to the void where the Forgotten Ones dwell. She looked firmly at the creature, which began to writhe in agony as it was quickly attacked. Hale was very impressed, seeing that several wounds were appearing on the Earth Dragon's body. That sudden attack made no sound, but he was sure something had passed through the creature's body, and he began to wonder what that woman might have done. The wounds were clearly visible, and it didn't take long for them to begin healing. Even so, the creature remained in front of them. The woman said that was just a warning and that it should leave, and that's exactly what the creature did. Hale had noticed that the wounds regenerated in the blink of an eye. Now he wants to know who the woman was who managed to drive away a mythological creature, because she had such a calm and serene expression. Approaching the boy, she asked if he was okay, and he said he was, thanks to her intervention. Even so, she suspected the boy might be in a state of shock. Asking if the successor could accompany her, she guided him through the forest until they reached a house built inside a tree. She offered him some tea made with herbs that his master used to enjoy. Soon he would feel calmer, and Hale said he was deeply grateful. Tasting the tea that was offered to him, it didn't take long for him to feel the effects of that herb. A single sip was enough to bring peace to his mind, something truly impressive. So he began drinking more of that cup. The woman was pleased that he had enjoyed the drink, asking if he liked the flavor. Completely grateful, he said that was the tastiest tea he had ever had in his entire life. Appreciating the boy's words, she asked if he was already feeling calmer, and he said he was embarrassed for having shown a side of his personality that wasn't usual. The woman said he didn't need to worry about anything that had happened. Just the fact that he didn't wet his pants in front of the creature was already very impressive, and he realized that it really was an earth dragon. The presence of the creature was so threatening he couldn't move. Even though it is the king of that forest, it doesn't dare approach her territory. But it must have been hard to resist the opportunity. The boy didn't understand what she meant, and she said the mana he carries is dense, making him a delicacy to the creature. She was certain the dragon found him very appetizing, and hunger must have made it forget the fear it has of her. Then she asked the boy if he had any other questions. Very intrigued by that dimension, he asked if they were really inside the book. The world felt so real it didn't seem artificial at all. He walked for several minutes in that forest. It was different from the other pages. Then she was going to tell him what that place was. The third challenge spans from pages 214 to 232. Her words left the boy even more surprised. He wanted to know if that earth dragon was created with magic, but the woman also didn't know how to answer. It's not real, but it's not a fake creature either. Hale wanted a better explanation, and she said that the entire place was made based on memories from the past. The world inside that book is a replica of the forest that once existed. To make his understanding easier, she said that this world is just a copy, so it is not real, but it's also not an illusion. Hale can't deny that he is increasingly impressed with the vastness of these pages. And all of this is recorded on the pages of that book. He doesn't understand how this can be possible. The woman also doesn't know the details. The only ones who can fully understand it are his master and the successor, which in the current situation is our protagonist. When he reaches his master's level, he will be able to understand everything. The boy wants to understand why his master created all that space. The woman said it was done so he could understand a certain magic. Hale is becoming increasingly curious about what it is, and the woman perfectly understands the state he is in. She stopped to reflect silently while looking at the boy. The boy was surprised by what he had heard. He needs to perfect the third circle to learn a magic essential for destruction, eyes that see through the essence of magic, the divine eyes. These golden eyes can see through anything, and the woman showed that she masters this technique. Hale realized that this is the mystical eyes version of his master's style. The woman said she hasn't perfected the technique yet. The only ones who can master it completely are the master and his successor. And Beitner asked her to be in charge of teaching this to him, and her memory exists for that purpose. Inside the city, the father of our protagonist is on the move. He asked one of his men to update him on what is happening. Haeun already has the news the patriarch had previously requested. It's about Minji and Minhyuk, who aren't that interested in the things the young master is doing. What's unexpected is that Violetta also hasn't shown any sign of doing absolutely anything, showing that the patriarch's order is truly being well executed by them. Although Violetta is acting kindly, he doesn't believe she will continue in this way regarding her brother, and she is probably being cautious because she knows he is being watched. However, the best father of the year already knows his children and specifically asked about Jihan. He learned that he seems to be quiet, and although it's suspicious, even the party he held the previous day didn't show any signs of anything suspicious. The patriarch is now aware of what's going on. He imagines that his children have learned to separate personal matters from official ones, and he told his subordinate to keep the protection over our protagonist until the time is up, something he would do with all his effort. He used a spell to block the sound as the information he was about to reveal was confidential. It's information about someone in that family being in contact with the Black Tower. They have already investigated 32 individuals, including the elders as well as high-ranking executives. The patriarch listened to this information with great interest, and Haeun's investigation conclusion is that all of them are clean. But the patriarch remains suspicious. Of the people who were investigated, 5 of them have a very suspicious context, and if things had been more intense, they might have captured someone involved. The patriarch now knows the identity of each one of them. He stated that he would resolve this matter personally. Meanwhile, our protagonist is still inside that pretend forest, which isn't pretend at all. The one is committed to teaching him that technique. They would immediately start the training so he could master the divine eye. Our boy wants her to make the training as intense as possible. She was excited by the successor's posture, which is very similar to the master's. While placing her hands on his eyes, she asked him to close them. She would now slowly channel her mana into him. As this happened, she would explain how the divine eye works. This would only be possible after reaching the 4th circle, and you would need other books. Hale remembered that from the books he had already accessed, he didn't see any reference to that technique. The knowledge was sealed until he reached the 4th circle. He asked if she was talking about Mimer's book. The woman was impressed by this information, asking if he knew anything about it, and our protagonist said he had a message from Mimir for her. The girl said he was doing very well, and that both of them had a reciprocal promise. In the silence of the woman, she apologized to the successor. He felt that for a moment, her mana had wavered, and thought he might have said something unnecessary. But things soon returned to normal. She apologized for what happened, but she was relieved that he had known. They will soon talk more about that other girl, but now they must focus on the training of the divine eyes. The reason he is restricted to the 4th circle is no secret. It's because she is on the 3rd trial. Helena was placed in that position to be in charge of providing all the explanations. There's a limitation to the amount of information that could be stored in that book, and she acknowledges that the master knows how to bring out the best in people. Our boy heard something about the limitation of the knowledge a book can contain through Mimir. The trial pages and the verification of the successor demand a large amount of magic, which cannot be held in a single book. The rest is compiled in the other volumes. Helena continues to infuse her mana into the boy's body. She said that everything was already prepared, asking Hale to open his eyes. That one's mana had perfectly synchronized with his infinite circle, to the point that he couldn't even distinguish it from his own, and he began to feel something different in his eyes. Helena knew it might seem strange at first, but she had completely blocked the boy's optic nerves, making him temporarily blind. However, it's still too early for him to be surprised. The divine eye is an additional sense, beyond the ones he already possesses. And to perfect it, all the other senses must be removed. The ability to feel touch, to smell fragrances, or to perceive taste would gradually disappear. Even his hearing, Hale felt completely isolated. With the boy's body lying on the floor, Helena was inviting him to enter the world of the dead. She waited patiently while observing the boy's body. He was immersed in a place where his senses were no longer functioning. Unable to perceive anything, he could no longer tell whether he was standing or sitting. He had lost all sensitivity, completely isolated from the outside world. He couldn't say for sure whether his body was functioning normally. It was as if he wasn't even alive, a truly terrifying feeling. It wasn't just visual darkness, it was as if he were immersed in absolute solitude. Definitely, if there's a hell somewhere, it is similar to what he was feeling. but the boy knew he needed to stay focused. All of this was nothing more than training, and the divine eye lies beyond his senses, giving him the opportunity to see through the darkness. So he began to concentrate so he could visualize the mana. It was necessary for him to place all of his focus on that task, and time kept passing as he tried to refine his skill. Observing the results, Helena began to feel truly surprised. No one can remain that calm with all their senses completely sealed. Just 1 minute is enough for people to begin flirting with madness. By the second minute, they already think of giving up on life, and after 3 minutes, it can become irreversible. She, better than anyone, knows how terrifying this can be and had only planned to show the boy how disturbing the experience could be. He had to adapt to it gradually, taking small steps within that feeling of complete isolation. And the successor in front of her remained completely unchanged even after 3 minutes. Only then did she realize that the forest was resonating with his mana, so it was safe to continue the training. And that's exactly what she did in the following minutes, realizing that it was truly amazing. It had been 20 minutes already in that state, and his breathing remained calm and his circle stable. That was the successor chosen by Idrid. She realized the master already knew he would be capable. Hale asked if she could hear his voice, which left the woman completely astonished. He was asking her to suspend the sensory block. Helena said she would do as he asked. Hale stood up, greatly relieved because now he could feel that he was breathing. As he stretched his body, Helena asked if he was feeling well. But she was curious, wanting to know how he managed to overcome that sensation, which must have been a frightening experience for him. And in fact, just remembering it was truly distressing. But he figured that the training had been planned to be safe, so he kept his mind completely empty, entering a state of hypnosis, focusing solely on the task of seeing the mana. Helena said he wouldn't have been able to overcome that fear with hypnosis alone. The boy agreed, saying he almost gave up halfway through. His body couldn't follow the commands of his mind. The darkness felt eternal, a hell of loneliness. When despair was about to destroy his focus, he came across a solid thought. At least his life is much better than it was a year ago, when he discovered he wasn't fit for modern magic. When all of his dreams were denied due to a simple statement, being considered an outcast by his family and his father, he was already living his personal hell, and that training was far better than the despair he had felt. The moonlight cuts through the tree canopy, bringing light to the entire forest. Outside, she asked if he was feeling a bit better, and he said yes. Understanding that blocking his senses is a necessary path to move forward, Helena began to be scared by the successor's resilience, but he assured her that he was feeling much better. All that experience was now in the past, for he felt immense gratitude for finally finding his own special path. Helena couldn't hold back her tears, having witnessed something so moving. She remembered the master, and oh my god, it seemed as a woman who would have thought. These memories made her even more emotional. Hale looked back and thanked Helena for what she had done for him. For a moment, she didn't understand, but even in the darkness, he could see her mana. A very gentle energy. This is what helped him feel well. This was what inspired him to keep going. She appreciated the compliment she received from the boy. Remembering the words she once heard from the master, it seems she's not a woman, the master is indeed a man. He wasn't expecting to hear words like that again. While sitting having tea, Hale said he was going back and forth to that place in the mimer book. Helena was glad to know the girl was doing well. It was very nice to hear that news, but the boy said he had just delivered a message, remembering Mimer's joy when delivering them. The woman said that if he found the girl, he must have heard about her in the forest. But he said no, stating that the two had made a promise and he couldn't tell him anything. Helena understood that the girl still remembered it, but she is no longer capable of keeping the promise, leaving our protagonist quite confused, and the woman apologized for making the atmosphere a bit awkward. Hale said it was fine, and she continued delivering information. If he knows about this promise, it means Mimer must have been quite interested in him. She's sure that's what happened, and began to think that maybe they are involved. Hale confirmed that the relationship they have is very good, and he'd like to know what that promise is. Helena noticed he was thinking a lot about the subject, but assured him it was a secret. Just between them, not even the master knows its content. But Hale is a very curious person, and he knows that in the past, the two must have been real people. Helena was surprised that Mimer hadn't spoken about it yet, saying she can't answer that question and she wouldn't be the one to reveal its contents. Faced with this, our protagonist resigned himself, recognizing that a vow cannot be broken. Helena deeply thanked the successor for his understanding regarding this. Once outside, Hale announced he was leaving, stating that he would be in her care, and Helena said she would need to train as well. Before leaving, he had one more question to ask. He wanted to know what kind of relationship Helena has with Mimir. The woman said they are just friends. Along with Ray, they are in charge of protecting the magic of Beitner, like constellations of students, yet still connected. Now our protagonist is heading to the other book. Announcing his arrival with great enthusiasm, Mimir said he had returned too quickly this time. The boy said he had class the next day and that's why he returned quickly. The girl wanted to know if he received adequate training, and our protagonist assured her that's what happened, revealing to her that he had mastered the divine eyes. Noticing that the mana around her floated lazily, which made the girl upset, he realized that she must have completed the training too. Mimir found it strange that he was doing well after such training, but Hale was fascinated by the things he couldn't see, mesmerized by the girl's mana, which is very serene despite being cold. Only then did she reveal that she's a person with a cold personality. Thus, they went for more tea, and there she learned that the successor was fine even with his senses blocked. Wondering if Helena must have taken it easy on him since her heart is soft. She even presumed that it was the magic of the forest that helped the boy, which he didn't understand. And she asked if he hadn't done the mana circulation therapy, but he hadn't done that as he hadn't developed any trauma. Now this version of the story became far too intriguing for her. It's impossible not to develop trauma after going through such an experience. He must have done something. And Mimer demanded that he reveal any hidden scheme he might have put into practice, revealing to her how his life was a year ago, leaving the girl very impressed. Naturally, she was very upset with the protagonist's family, and who wouldn't be, right? A year ago, he walked this land with no purpose at all. Since everyone had expectations for that prodigy, it only made things worse. That's what helped him overcome the hell of loneliness. Mimer had always sensed a very dark side to success, perhaps because he went through such an environment. Now she understands him much better. Hale didn't expect her to show so much empathy toward him. The more he understands those women, the more they understand him in return. That made him a bit embarrassed for a moment. Mimer immediately changed the subject, asking if he would be able to meet his short deadline. Hale is very confident in his skills. He's going to make it happen, because he realized he's a very lucky person, and there's nothing that can stop him anymore. He needs to keep moving forward. The books he uses to study are resting on his desk, and our boy continues reflecting on Helena's words. The divine eyes grow aligned with the infinite circle. The first circle reveals the color of mana, the second its fragmented structure, and the third reveals the essence of magic. To master it completely, he must be able to see mana whenever he wishes. So he needs to use that technique naturally. But the boy began to wonder whether he would be able to do that. Only then did he remember he had received an email from the Blue Tower. They had already decided which mage from the 5th circle he would be facing. The man's name is Han-wook, and he is 29 years old. Our protagonist was surprised as if he had met him before. Morning arrived at the Obelisk Academy. Several students were inside the training room. Sunchen watched his friends training, and he wondered whether the two were still even human. Because the girl had skill and expertise far beyond normal, sending multiple attacks toward Hale, who waited patiently for them to get close, summoning shields to protect himself completely. Adela found out about the Blue Tower email and was surprised that they had said it with a strategic plan. That's what happened. He didn't receive the identity of the person, but a full strategic guide, and they need to take advantage of this opportunity. Adela was going to say a few more things, but she realized she needed to concentrate on training. Her vision was briefly blinded, and that wind magic managed to get close to her, which left her very impressed. Hale calmly approached her, saying he still didn't know what the tower's intention was, and he wanted to know what his friend thought about it. While she gave him her hand, she asked if she could take a look at that file too. After checking the information, she confirmed the protagonist's evaluation was correct. This is a strategic guide. Sunchen didn't want to be left out and wanted to see it too. Adela also said the evaluation was very precise. Maybe it's a way for the master of the Blue Tower to show his consideration, showing that Hale should keep improving his skills. The boy, for his part, understood it as a way of gaining an advantage. Sunchen said it didn't matter what it was a good thing, and indeed it was. But they still needed to keep training hard, which left Sunchen disappointed as he wanted to rest a bit more. He wanted a longer break since he hadn't even caught his breath yet. Havel said he needed to improve his stamina, leaving his friend quite frustrated. While he was running, a huge explosion happened behind him. Sunchen asked the careless ones to be more cautious because they were inside an enclosed space, and they were wrecking the training room. The day passed, and the students returned to their dormitories. Adela arrived at her room completely exhausted, throwing herself onto her bed, ready to sleep immediately, even though she knew she needed to change clothes. But her exhaustion was so intense that it would have to wait until the next morning. She remembered that the protagonist's lunar bullet was already faster and stronger than hers. The girl started thinking about what was happening. Even though she was putting in so much effort, there was still a big difference between them. This couldn't go on like that, and she realized she needed to train even harder, and she would dedicate herself more and more because she didn't want to lose to her rival in techniques from her own family. It wasn't time for her to sleep and rest. She decided to take a cold shower and watch the recording of that day's training. Already in the protagonist's room, he had entered that book once again. Walking through the forest with his eyes closed, he didn't imagine that the blocking of his senses wouldn't be necessary, easily finding himself with Helena. The woman noticed that he could now easily see mana. But the boy still gets headaches if the period is prolonged, however, he can now see mana whenever he wishes. Now they can move on to the next step of the training. Helena said he would use the divine eyes to see her magic circle. As he is noticing, he will see essence of the magic, contemplating the spaces where it can be broken. Hale is trying hard to see these spaces, and Helena said that every technique has empty spaces. He needs to learn to use them to erase the magic and break a magic circle. This is called disassembly, a way to completely neutralize the magic circle. By optimizing the mystical gaze to its maximum, he will be able to nullify the magic. And she asked the boy to try as well, as she had a feeling he would learn quickly, creating a magic circle in front of him. He began to pay close attention to it, finally noticing what he had ignored before. The mana of it is really warm and gentle, but he still can't see the spaces of the circle, and he started focusing only on this. He said that he needs to analyze the structure of the circle, and strengthening his mystical eyes, he did as she had instructed. No magical formula is completely perfect. This is a phrase that's in the Book of Mimir. Knowing this, every magical formula has empty spaces. Seeing through the essence of magic, hearing the sound of mana, helps him find the flaws in the technique. Finally, the successor seems to have noticed something. Helena was becoming more and more pleased with his progress. Hale tried to use the disassembly of magic for the first time. At the academy, the students' class had ended, and they had received instructions about the Olympics. The protagonist's father, along with the head of the Blue Tower, were also in that meeting. Outside, the two met once again. Kim wasn't expecting him to show up personally at that meeting, and the patriarch of the family didn't expect to meet him, saying that he had no reason to be there. And the man said he was participating only as a sponsor, which intrigued the patriarch. Only then did Kim reveal that he was prospecting the opportunity, and the patriarch understood that the Blue Tower must be sending its artisans to the competition. They are still considering the possibility, which is why he's prospecting, but the patriarch already finds it surprising that he's considering this, since the Blue Tower is not in a position to send its artisans to the Olympics. Kim said things were going very well, and that this year's Olympics are worth the investment, which made the patriarch even more curious. Until the leader of the Blue Tower revealed that with Hale leading the team, the Korean team could win a gold medal. After hearing this, the patriarch was a little surprised. Kim assumes that he also has high expectations for his son. Putting his hands on his chin, he soon realized that his son must have made a proposal to that man as well. Kim couldn't hide that it was exactly what happened. The patriarch wants to know what was promised him, and the leader of the Blue Tower remains silent for a moment. The boy promised that he would win the gold medal, and asked for the tower's artisans as his engineers, and asked what he said to the patriarch. The head of the family said that the boy promised victory, and asked that he offer protection until that happens. Recognizing that his son had changed a lot in the last year, becoming a very confident person, Kim asked if the patriarch accepted this proposal without any countercondition. He said he has his own terms and returned the question, since he wanted to know if the leader of the Magic Tower believed the words of a child. Kim realized that that man and his son are quite similar, revealing that he had put a condition of his own: as long as the boy satisfies it, he will provide the engineers. It didn't take long for the patriarch to become interested in knowing what it is. Hale needs to defeat a 5th Circle Mage in a duel. The best father in the galaxy liked this challenge a lot. If his son wins, it means he's good, and if he loses, he will be miserably beaten in the process. Both results please him, and soon they arrange for the patriarch to also watch the duel. Our boy continues going to the forest to train. Those training sessions are very exhausting. Helena is bringing a little more tea, saying that he is working very hard. Finally, the training had concluded. Hale said that Helena is also working very hard. It's thanks to her that he managed to get where he is, and she was already worried, thinking she might be demanding too much from the boy. But it's thanks to the master's cloak that he's able to handle all of this. Even so, she offered him tea to ease his fatigue. In that regard, he is very different from the master, who hated anything physically exhausting. He used to solve all his problems with magic and complain about every bit of physical effort he made. Hale realized that with the master's mastery of magic, it's normal for him to dislike that sort of thing. While they were there, Helena had a few more things to say. She is grateful to the successor for putting in so much effort, but their training has come to an end. Thanks to him, she enjoyed the experience of teaching very much, and she feels immense gratitude. Since she began waiting for the successor, she knew that her time with him would eventually end. Hale started to feel confused by that sense of farewell. Once her role ended, the Page of Destruction would vanish. She and the entire forest. This was a promise she had made with the master. Hale immediately grew worried upon understanding the truth, but Helena asked him not to be sad. Everything was made to disappear one day, and now it was time for them to say goodbye. Hale felt he still had so much to say to her. His progress wouldn't have been possible without that woman's effort, and she revealed that she was grateful he was the successor, possessing only a single regret, that she wouldn't be able to witness his development all the way to his greatest heights. As she faded away, she told him not to falter in the face of difficulties and challenges and never to give up. Helena's hands were no longer sensitive to touch. She asked him to take care of Mimir because she gets lonely easily. Hale promised he would do as she asked. This was an eternal farewell, a pain he had never felt before, a grief hard to overcome. Her final words were congratulations because he had reached the 3rd circle, and finally she disappeared. Her page no longer existed in that book. He was sent back to his room, and the first thing he did was check if the page was still there. Despite the farewell, he is eternally grateful to Helena. He will always treasure the days of training in the forest in his heart. Inside the Blue Tower, they were already gathered at the training field. There wasn't much time left before the duel would begin. Sunshine, who was also there, couldn't hide his anxiety, and the patriarch asked what the odds of his son's victory were. While the leader of the Blue Tower was speaking with the patriarch, Sunshine wondered how he ended up between those two people. It would be much better for him if Adela were there, but she was closer to the arena to provide moral support. The two were discussing the battle, and the leader of the magical tower recalled the patriarch's question. For him, the chance of victory was only 10%, because he knew the abilities of the person he had chosen. That probability was different from what the patriarch had imagined, which made Kim curious. The best father of the year believed that his son's chance of victory was negative, and he used all the optimism he had to reach that conclusion. After hearing his opinion, Kim asked what Suncheon thought would happen. He asked the boy to set aside his friendship with the protagonist and to think objectively, to contemplate the true truth in his heart. He looked at his friend, reflecting on it, coming to the conclusion that the chance of victory was 50%. Kim thought that estimate was too optimistic and wanted to know what led him to it. Suncheon revealed that there wasn't anything in particular, but he was sure that if his friend went all in, those would be the odds. Because he had been developing at an impressive speed and had never shown his full power, Kim became very interested in the statement that Hail had still never gone all out. The secretary said that the protections had been properly checked, and the match would now begin. They would start fighting soon. The man chosen to be his opponent remained very calm. Adela returned to the proper place to watch the match, finding a Suncheon who looked like he was about to have a heart attack. The opponents were calmly analyzing each other, and the secretary instructed them to take their positions. The man said he hadn't expected to face a prodigy, and our protagonist asked him to go easy on him. Finally, the duel would begin. The man gave the advantage of the first move to the protagonist, who kindly accepted the offer. In one hand, he prepared his wind magic, and in the other, a fireball. He is determined to put all his power into this first attack. That man is impressed, as this is the magic that the rumors have been talking about is truly fascinating. Our protagonist warned that he is too relaxed, but the man assured him this is a situation where he can afford to be like this. Our protagonist appreciates his posture and is curious to see how long he will be able to maintain it, firing his attacks towards him. The man waits patiently to be hit, saying that it's indeed impressive. All the spells seem the same, but some are faster and others follow confusing trajectories, making it very hard to dodge. If the fifth circle spell came at him this way, the result could be catastrophic. But he remains calm, performing his defense barrier, confident that it won't be enough, creating a large barrier that blocked all those attacks. After all of them hit the target, all that was left was smoke inside the arena. Our protagonist realized that the fifth circle defense easily ignores his attacks, but its weakness is that the summoned entity also remains isolated, and his opponent cannot prevent him from getting close. He had left a large gap for him to approach, and the man soon realized that this was his true intention. He said this wouldn't change the outcome of things, but our protagonist disagreed. He finally managed to get his hands on the barrier, and by using interference, he made it start to crack, leaving his opponent completely surprised. Even his friends weren't expecting something like this. The power he was putting into that barrier was increasing its cracks. Both Kim and the Patriarch were also closely observing the result of this. Hale managed to do what he wanted, stating that it was already too late. He had precisely calculated the time needed for the interference, speeding up the process, changing the trajectory of his flames and the wind, causing a large firestorm in the space delimited by the barrier. Pieces of the magic shield flew across the arena. Adela couldn't believe what she was seeing. Suncheon was also stunned. The absolute barrier was destroyed. Hale wished his opponent would lower his guard for just one more moment. It would have made his life easier. Being relaxed is very good, but remaining careless is always the maximum. That's what the master of the Blue Tower taught him. When the outer shield was broken, he was able to conjure another defense. Our protagonist realized that the battle would continue, and the man said that it was his turn to take the offensive. Hale was already prepared to react to the attack. He had received information about that man, knowing that he strengthens his body and has a great curiosity for new magic, and his specialty is fire magic. So he was already prepared to fight at close range with fire. The mage quickly advanced towards the protagonist, noticing that he is interested in his magical techniques. That man is watching him closely. He won't aim at any vital points. Even so, it's not in his interest to take it easy. Hale predicted where he would be attacked. His right target would be the target of that fire sword, barely managing to dodge the first attack. Still, his arm was superficially cut, but there is no time for him to stay distracted. Hale managed to retaliate with a punch to the stomach, and even though he was strong, the man had to hold back the sudden urge to go to the bathroom. That was enough for Hale to gain a little more distance, receiving compliments from his opponent, who noticed that the boy could react quickly. Hale said he has knowledge of close-range battle. Knowing this, his opponent started changing the magic he was holding in his hands, since it's part of his opponent to adjust his battle strategy by analyzing his enemy. He said the young man's future is truly frightening. Even though he is at the third circle, he's dangerous. That's why he's going to change his posture in the fight. He decided to use everything he's got. After summoning voluminous flames, he made fire rain down from the sky. One of the privileges of mages in the fifth circle is being able to use area annihilation magic. Being in the third circle, our protagonist wouldn't be able to defend against that. His opponent believes the end of the battle has come, making our protagonist activate the AliExpress Sharingan. He wouldn't let his victory slip away like that. Using resonance, he began gathering water with his hands, creating a large shield to protect himself. This left his opponent confused because it shouldn't be effective against the attack he had executed. But water vapor obscured the observer's view. His friends were worried as they couldn't see anything. Kim knows that this magic should be from the third circle, but judging by the result, it seems stronger. The father of our protagonist remains silent as he still doesn't know whether to cheer for or against him. Inside the arena, they can't see anything, at least not if you don't have the divine eye. The man believes that Hale's vision is also obscured by the circumstances. Little does he know that he's already being coldly observed. The boy can see absolutely everything, precisely identifying the mana of the fire sword. He begins moving his feet toward the man, who managed to hear the approaching footsteps, reacting quickly with his fire sword. But he was caught off guard from his blind spot. Our protagonist was wielding a lightning spear, and he had no idea how the boy got so close so quickly. He considered using the absolute shield, but since it had already been broken once, it would be risky. Only one option remained. Hale saw the color of that mana. It was yellow, a sign that his opponent would try something else. Placing his hands on the ground, he raised a wall of earth to protect himself, and the boy needed to act quickly to stop that barrier from fully forming. Striking his spear into the ground, he prevented the earth from materializing, and the glow of his lightning spear was once again able to blind the man's vision, buying time for our protagonist to coat his own hands in flames, allowing him to maintain his offensive. It was all too fast. The man needed to act, but Havel saw the color of the mana again. He identified blue. He was superficially hit by water projectiles. Even so, he didn't abort his attack, which was already underway. The impact of his fire magic clashed with the water shield. Once again, the resulting steam clouded everyone's vision, and the man found himself temporarily blinded because of it. That situation was starting to annoy him. Realizing it was a trick by the boy, he said his schemes would end there. Hale reacted quickly, placing his hand on the ground. He needed to enter the essence of the magic to find its gaps. That way, magic would no longer be magic, and he used the technique he had learned in the forest against him. His opponent realized that the magic he had invoked vanished before his eyes. Hale said that the moment when victory seems certain is when battle becomes truly dangerous, creating a great whirlwind inside the arena. The secretary said it was over and the winner would be declared. Hale emerged victorious from that brief clash. After all that action, he was very exhausted. Kim was already waiting for the boy, acknowledging that the match had truly been incredible. Hale closed the door to the waiting room. He didn't want to talk right now, but Kim opened it anyway, saying he had no words to express how pleased he was. He understood that the boy's strategy was to nullify magic. It was like watching a chess match, and he got chills just thinking about it. He really wanted to know what that final spell was and was curious how he managed to get around the limits of memorization. Hale asked if he would believe that he did it using alteration, but we know that's a lie. Kim said he believes that version. He can even understand everything up to the 3rd circle. But from the 4th circle onward, things changed completely. He didn't improve his memorization. He completely eliminated its flaws. It's an impossible contradiction, which left our boy speechless. To summon something that quickly is truly masterful. In addition, he was able to cancel out his opponent's magic, which made Kim even more curious. The boy is permanently hesitant to reveal the truth to him, so he needs to make up some story. At the Blue Tower headquarters, Kim remains deep in thought. He's in his office with his secretary. They're deciding which artisans will be the engineers for this year's Olympiad. His secretary is in charge of that task. The priority is not to delay current projects. He asked her what she thinks about all this, but the woman didn't understand the question. Kim can't stop thinking about our protagonist, and he's starting to believe that a gold medal is a possibility. She said the result isn't impossible, but he reminded her that just the day before, she barely believed in a bronze medal, and his secretary said things had changed a lot in just one day. Kim realized that she's also very impressed. While focused on her work, she said it really was amazing. He said she even forgot she was the referee of the match, and the woman asked him not to tease her. Despite the jokes, Kim keeps trying to understand what kind of magic the boy uses. The woman asked if he had watched the match using the ruby eyes, and he had. Even so, he still wasn't able to understand everything. The mist hid some things from him, or there should have been some kind of protection. It's a bit scary if it's true. He tries to accept what happened, but he still can't understand how he was able to destroy that magic circle. The secretary became thoughtful and worried. Even the ruby eyes couldn't see everything. Kim is so curious, he directly asked the boy in the waiting room. It was when they met earlier. Hadel said he had already told him last time, but he also has his own secrets and can't reveal everything about his magic, and he was advised to figure it out for himself. The secretary asked what he would do if it were something illegal, but he is sure it's not. The structure and purity of the mana corroborate his point of view. There's just one thing out of place in all this. The boy said he had perfected memorization with transformation magic, and he's sure the boy doesn't use this. Still, the Olympics this year will be very interesting. Quickly changing the subject, he asked if the woman would like to go out to eat. While smiling at him, she asked if he would consider that over time. Inside the academy dormitory, the boy's alarm clock wouldn't stop ringing. He can't get out of bed. His whole body is sore. He slept for 8 straight hours, and maybe he feels like this because he used disassembly on the resonance circle. He can't use his own mana to resonate, making the master's cloak useless. He acknowledged that he needs to be more cautious, and he continues sitting on his bed. Only then did he notice what was on his phone. He had received a message from his father at that very moment. Wondering if the boy must be exhausted, he got medical assistance and advised him to focus on his own recovery. Who would have thought, once again, the best father in the galaxy making his star shine? His father left the duel without speaking to the boy, which made him very worried. But now he knows everything is fine. He's regaining his father's trust again, and there's little time left for the Olympics. Hale returned once again inside the book, being received by Mimer, who was very happy. He said he won the battle, and that it was very easy. but that's not what his facial expression is saying. Hale revealed that it wasn't easy, and if his plan had gone wrong, he would have definitely lost, and he only had the advantage because of the information he got from the master of the Blue Tower. But he knows he needs to train again. He wants a book on the fourth circle, on the Ring of Expansion. The fourth magical circle is the expansion, and she gathered all the necessary books for him to understand the subject. He should read all those books that were presented to him. In the classroom, the students are being instructed on AI, and they should write a text about it. But among them, there's someone who completely ignores this information. It's our protagonist, and he keeps reflecting on the expansion circle. It is fundamentally different from the previous circles. The first three overlap like peels, but the fourth circle envelops them all, making the previous circles more stable in shape. This significantly increases the efficiency of magic, even removing the disadvantages of the deliberation circle, reducing mental exhaustion and increasing the duration of resonance. Its penalty is also reduced, which makes disassembly easier to use. Even the Divine Eye will be better used from now on. But since it's a completely new structure, joining all these circles won't be an easy task. And currently, this is his biggest challenge, because according to one of the books he had read, it will take at least a year to master all of this. He already knew it would be hard, but he didn't expect it to be so time-consuming, and he doesn't have much time left before the competition. Hale and his friends are once again in the academy training room. He is controlling the time on the treadmill. They need to run for 5 more minutes. Sunshin is sweating so much it even looks like he's running in the rain. The girl, on the other hand, remains unchanged. Once they complete that exercise, they'll rest for 10 minutes. Sunshin seems like he's about to contemplate his own death as an event. Adela went to the boy to help him, and he was quite surprised by this action. She said they had all promised they would push themselves harder each time. And indeed, that's exactly what happened the night after the battle with Manhwa. Hale was completely exhausted from that event. He couldn't train with his friends. Sunshin even tried to convince him to train that day, making the protagonist remember his own words. Adela realized what was happening and said that she was also tired, suggesting that they should rest. Sunshin was the only one who tried to prevent that from happening, reminding them that the best part of training happens when they're exhausted. That's how he was indoctrinated by his friend, who now seemed to have forgotten his own words. Hale got really annoyed by that, but if reason were crap, his friend would already be drowning in it. He said he really couldn't forget that mentality. Warning her that the next day's training would be even more agonizing, Sunshin realized what was about to happen and suggested that the protagonist go rest. So Hale dragged the boy away to train a bit more. As they walked through the city, Sunshin realized that a genius is still a genius. His initial strategy hadn't worked in combat, yet he was able to come up with something entirely new. That's the most impressive part about the protagonist. And he asked Adela if he had always been like that when they were kids. The girl said the only thing that changed was that he was a little younger. Sunshin wanted to know if he was more immature, and she said that's exactly it. Actually, he was always a very optimistic person and used to overestimate his own abilities. But she also behaved that way, and having him as a rival, she never changed that behavior. She's starting to like it more and more. Realizing that she's increasingly fascinated by the protagonist's techniques, Sunshin has trouble believing that his friend used to be like that. Everything changed when he entered the academy. He realized that being incompatible with AI wasn't a curse, but a disguised blessing. Adela was very surprised by that statement, and the boy said he didn't mean it in a weird way, saying that geniuses always have a particular kind of arrogance, and that's what makes them grow beyond their limits, and their friend isn't an arrogant person. Being incompatible with AI is what caused this. Adela asked if he was assuming that the protagonist got better because of that flaw, and that's the conclusion he drew from these events, but he believes his friend might get upset if he hears that. But he's happy that he found his own path, and that it works, leaving the girl completely speechless. He said they should also strive to give their best, showing that he's following the same path as the protagonist. They're going to push themselves to the limit for those Olympics, and the girl promised that they would work harder and harder to win. That's exactly what was happening while they talked. Our protagonist looked at Sunshin, who wanted to know why he had asked that question. Hale handed him a bottle of water, saying he had worked hard. Apparently, he delivers both the disease and the cure with the same hand. Our protagonist said he never made his friend sick, but that wasn't what he was talking about. Adela, it seems, is a strong candidate for kidney stones since she doesn't drink water. She's always holding that banana milk. Now they need to return to special training. Adela and Sunshin are now in their moment of rest. Our protagonist approached her and asked if they could talk for a moment. The girl looked at him with interest. They went outside to talk about it in private. The team for the Olympics had already been defined, and he wanted to restructure their training. Since starting the next day, they could skip some classes to put the training into practice. Even though the academy was providing training for them, Hadel believed 8 hours wouldn't be enough. That's why he wanted to change a few things. In the morning, they would hold meetings to define the strategic approach. In these meetings, they would analyze each event that would happen in the Olympics, so they could understand what was needed to win and also assimilate the new rules for that year. Adela considered the suggestion interesting, but wanted to know why only the two of them were talking about it. Hadel said their friend was already overloaded with physical training and too tired to listen. They also needed to analyze the foreign competitors. This was already being done by the Blue Tower team. And starting the next day, they would begin implementing those changes. The girl had something to say. She agreed with the theoretical part, but she didn't know if the older students would listen to them. Our protagonist didn't even see that as a problem, because there are ways to deal with that. The next day, they were already prepared to train. Sunshin wanted to know if his classmates weren't nervous about it, and they said there was no reason to give in to nerves now. Only then did Sunshin reveal his concern. Aside from the three of them, the rest of the students were third years. But his colleagues don't care at all about this. Adela said she would show them who's going to win, and a girl heard this saying that she is more arrogant than the rumors say. The rest of the students had gathered to train as well. Among them is a guy with silver hair named Kang, a generic guy with glasses who looks like that kid from Digimon, but his name is Jin Seok. A girl with red hair, possibly one-eyed, her name is Difficult, so let's just call her One-Eyed. This same girl approaches the protagonist group, wanting to know how they plan to beat them in the competition. She asked Adela to repeat that in front of her, saying how she was going to beat them. And that's exactly what she did, saying that there isn't a single third-year student capable of beating her, which made Sunshin quite worried. He started apologizing on her behalf. He said his friend was crazy, but Adela said she was speaking the truth. That only made the situation even more tense. Our protagonist tried to act friendly and apologize for the commotion they were causing, asking if it would be okay for there to be a friendly match between the two teams. He knows he needs to master the whole team if he wants to lead them during the Olympics. The silver-haired guy realized where he was going with this. It would be 3 from his team against the protagonist's team. The one-eyed girl wants to be included in this as she wants to teach the protagonist's future romantic partner to be more humble. Only then did our protagonist say that they hadn't quite understood his proposal. It's a match between all the third-year students against his team. The one-eyed girl was so angry she almost had a stroke. While Sunshin's soul had already abandoned his body, the silver-haired guy asked what the protagonist's true intention was in proposing something like this. Because he knows they wouldn't be provoked without a purpose, there must be a reason for this. Hale had seen that guy a few times during his childhood. He's from the Shimu family and remains as cautious as ever. Our protagonist said he has no reason, but it's the best way for them to get to know everyone's abilities. The nerd with glasses got very irritated with this, saying that the newbie wants to try to finish them off using his abilities. The silver-haired guy realized that the protagonist's intention is to establish control over them. And the Premium Plus Extra tried to intimidate our protagonist, saying that their hypothesis is correct. But Hale doesn't flinch for a single moment. The one-eyed girl said they're very arrogant, and their patience has a limit. She knows they are talented, but they can't disrespect the older ones. If it were a one-on-one battle, they might have a chance to win. But against 7 students at once, that's practically impossible. They wouldn't be able to beat them, especially when their team has a weakling like that. Those words hit the bottom of the ego of our poor, tired friend, while the protagonist and Adela remained unshaken. The one-eyed girl said it would only be okay once, it just had to apologize and she would ignore this. And the silver-haired guy warned that they had crossed a line and shouldn't have done that. But our protagonist didn't care about those words. He said they're too loud, being constantly watched by the silver-haired guy. The protagonist's best friend is already completely scared by all this interaction. Hale told them to shut up and start writing immediately, because he was going to show them a few things. So the video ends here. If you don't want to miss the next part, activate the notification bell, and see you next time on Tob's channel.